Okay, so we are not experts on Tartaria by any means. This is a subject that we learned a lot about along the way too. There are researchers out there who have been digging into this for years, and there's amazing videos out there. And I'm not gonna lie, we kind of tapped into some of that information and some of those other researchers and the work that they've done. And, we've added and included a lot of that in this webinar. And we will be giving those people a shout out. Thank God for TikTok because it's one of those places where you can actually go and type in Tartaria and find some real information, or at least people who are trying to connect the dots.
Hmm.
This isn't like, the past webinars where there's been people for decades talking about this, right? So there's not a lot of
Right.
books, there's not a lot of documents. I mean, there are documents, we found stuff, but there's just, a lot of previous webinars, there was a lot of reading involved and stuff like that, but there's just simply not that. Now, there is a
Right.
lot that we could have gotten into about the past, the history of like Eurasia and Mongolia, and, we could, depending on how much you want to actually dive into that aspect of things, but we're just going to try and approach this as if everyone watching this has never heard of Tartaria before, and we're going to go through everything. It's going to be like information overload, and we're going to try and just do like an all-encompassing perspective here. And make sure you stick around for the very end because our good friend Sherry Divband actually, she sent us a video. She made a video for us specifically for this webinar, which contains information that she received through regressions from children. So she has been working with children for years now, and she channels the children's higher selves, and information has been coming through about Tartaria through the children. And when I shared this thumbnail that you see on social media, she reached out to me. She's like, "No way, you're not going to believe it, but there's this information's been coming through for a few years now, but I just never really was interested in it. But it was showing up again in my sessions, and I saw your thumbnail, and here's what's coming through." And I'm like, "Wow, can you please record that? Because no one's talking about the stuff that's coming through from these children." So she recorded us a video, and we're going to play that at the very end of this webinar. It's 17 minutes long, but it really takes us to the next level, and it kind of brings in a whole new perspective. All right.
Yeah, I highly recommend sticking around through the whole thing. You will not regret it. Like Tyler said, that video at the very end that Sherry did is very powerful and it's amazing. So stick
All
around
right.
for that for sure.
Thank you, Sherry. Here we go.
Thank you, Sherry.
There we go.
There we go.
So, Sphinx discovered in Memphis, Tennessee in 1912. True or false? False. So, this is something that I came across, and I started with this slide because it's really important to note while you're doing research, you can come across information that is not true. So this is something that shows up a lot when you type in Tartaria and you start researching, and there's even people who've done entire videos about this Sphinx discovered in Memphis, Tennessee in 1912. So I started doing some digging, and I'm like, where are these people seeing this thing discovered in Tennessee? I couldn't find anything, only to find out that it wasn't discovered in Memphis, Tennessee. It was discovered in Memphis, Egypt.
Egypt,
In Memphis,
which is
Egypt.
what Memphis, Tennessee was named after.
Right.
So
So this is just one of those things that's like one of those hyper sensationalized headlines that really wasn't true. And people see that and they'll just make a video about it and like, well, at least, dig into this a little bit. So just, I don't know, just some advice. Go
real
ahead, Aaron.
quick, I can tell you it's Egypt alone just by how that guy's dressed right there. So I was in Egypt back in end of March into through April earlier this year, and we saw people dressed like that all over the place in Egypt.
Right.
So like how many people have you seen dressed like that walking around Memphis, Tennessee, or any city? You
Right.
don't see too many. So to me, I can look at that looking at that photo, I'm like, oh yeah, Egypt, look at that guy, look at how he's dressed.
Right.
So yeah, just another reminder, like just because something's shared out, don't just immediately share it out without at least trying to look into it to verify it.
And we actually
Um,
we'll have another example of this later on in this webinar too, of something that we found and we had to look it up and wasn't exactly true, but still. interesting regardless. Anyway, here
Yeah.
we go. Just some of these memes. I'm sure you guys have seen these memes floating around online, so the whole Tartaria thing is basically, we've been lied to about everything, including our history. And the history is so much more than what we've been told. And there was a whole wipe out of a civilization and a reset. But these are some funny memes. What they taught us in history class and what they don't teach us in history class. We have the Hollywood cowboys and Indians, Wild West type of history and the textbook history. And then we have this amazing World's Fair type of structures, these Roman structures right here in the United States. And they were apparently allegedly just built for the World's Fairs, but we're going to get into why that might not be the case. The most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history. And the truth about Tartaria could change everything we know about our world history. And that's true. Because if this is true, which it is from our research, then it does change everything. And it actually makes a lot of what we would consider myth and legend valid because we have some connections to Marco Polo and some of his discoveries and his findings, and it's everything from myth and legend. So, what is Tartaria? So, whenever I first learned about Tartaria, I had no idea. People were like, "You've never heard of Tartaria?" I'm like, "No, what is it?" And it was explained to me, and I still didn't get it. And I'm just like, okay. And it was years before I really finally went down the rabbit hole. But the theory is it's a global, unified civilization that stretched across the entire planet with incredibly advanced technology that, according to some, has been intentionally erased from history. And this is something I haven't seen covered anywhere. And thanks to, the universe and my wonderful friends who reach out to me and send me stuff while we're researching for these webinars, something that we didn't consider, and I couldn't find anything else that really covered this. Where does the name Tartaria come from? So this YouTube video, Ancient Architects, this is how they built the Inca stone walls, talks about something called tartaric acid. And this is a direct quote on the right from a friend of mine. She sent me this text along with this video. She said, I found it really interesting that in this guy's theory for the melting and molding of the stones, they would have needed to apply a tartaric acid, a naturally occurring acid that works 10 times faster on dissolving silicate minerals. What are the chances of the name of that specific acid for crystal manipulation overlapping with that civilization?
Right. It's like one of the things that slipped through the cracks of the reset, right? It's like the acid is literally named after the civilization, but they never changed the name of the acid, even though they tried to erase Tartaria. So it's like one more clue, right?
Well, and if it's talking about, it might be the key to how these ancient structures were built.
Right, right,
This
exactly.
tartaric acid actually comes up again in this webinar,
But it's
and
called tartaric acid because it was used in Tartaria, in the
right,
Tartaria.
but
Um,
it's used for crystal manipulation, and we
right.
know stones are crystals. So, um,
And I'm sure all this goes back to Atlantis and Lemuria times, which we get into later. And we think Tartaria is basically an
right.
offshoot of those civilizations.
Here it is, tartaric acid. You can buy this stuff, food grade. It derives its name from the medieval alchemical term tartarus. It is a white crystalline powder, odorless and with an acidic taste. Tartaric acid is a white crystalline organic acid that occurs naturally in many fruits, notably in grapes, but also in bananas, tamarinds, and citrus. It was claimed to have been discovered in 1769. This guy, Carl Wilhelm Steele, was credited for the discovery in 1769. But if it occurs naturally, we can only assume that our ancestors very well knew about this.
Right. And what are the chances again that it's called the same thing as
Right.
Tartaria?
But tartaric acid is present in the juices of various fruits, particularly in grapes, and it's used in wine also. And it's interesting how grapes and wine show up in our ancient history, right?
Hmm.
And I think that grapes and wine and the tartaric acid all plays some role, even in the building materials.
I mean, ancient Rome, ancient Greece, like that's,
Right.
here you go.
Yeah, in Greek mythology, right here. In the Greek poet Hesiod's theology, Tartarus was the third of the primordial deities following after Chaos and Gaia and preceding Eros, and was the father by Gaia of the monster Typhon. Tartarus was the offspring of Ether and Gaia. There's the idea of the ether again. Tartarus was the offspring of Ether and Gaia. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
In Greek mythology, Tartarus was the deep abyss that is used as a dungeon of torment and suffering for the wicked as a prison for the Titans, which is really interesting because we know about the War of the Titans, and Tartarus was the name of the dungeon of torment. And this is the mainstream explanation. You can read this one, Aaron.
Tartary or Tartaria is a historical name for Central Asia and Siberia. Ignorance surrounding Tartary's use as a place name has spawned conspiracy theories, including ideas of a hidden past and mud floods. So this is obviously the mainstream narrative Wikipedia. Come on, it's Wikipedia. Of course, trying to debunk all of this stuff as just a crazy conspiracy theory that's BS. Because, of course, if the same powers that control Wikipedia and all the mainstream are basically the same people that have been suppressing the civilization the whole time, what do you think they're going to say? So, Tartary official explanation is that it was a blanket term used in Western European literature and cartography for a vast part of Asia bounded by the Caspian Sea, the Ural Mountains, the Pacific Ocean, and the northern borders of China, India, and Persia, at a time when this region was largely unknown to European geographers.
So they're
So that's
just,
how they try to explain it away when it shows up on all these old maps, but you'll see shortly why that cannot be true.
yeah, a blanket term is what they say.
Right.
So this is 1771 Encyclopedia Britannica talks about Tartary, Grand Tartary of 4 million square miles territory, 4 million square mile territory.
That's
And
massive. Yeah.
here we have it documented in Encyclopedia Britannica. And in the general history of China, it literally shows up as a country with a population and it shows the area in square miles. So we
Right.
know that it's not just a blanket
So
term.
So please explain to me why they would show a population number and a square mile area for something that's not a country and a list of countries and a list of, well, Chinese Empire, China, they're all countries. Like these are all actual nations and countries. So why would they list Tartary with those things specifically in that
Well,
list if it was just, oh, a general area that's not doesn't mean anything?
it already debunks it because Tartary was supposed to be the blanket term for all of these countries.
Right. Right.
So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
but here it
So
is identified and singled out.
separately from them. So that alone debunks it right there. So
So what I realize is that Tartaria isn't actually a theory, right? We can find a lot of evidence that it existed, but the main conspiracy theory is that it was worldwide. We have evidence of it
mhm.
being in Eurasia, but the whole conspiracy theory is that it was an advanced global civilization, and then that's where we're going to get into some of that evidence. And there seems to be a potentially an Atlantis connection, which I think Sherry might talk about at the end of this as well.
She does.
But what we realize is that this goes back way, way, way further than we possibly could imagine.
Mhm.
And we're not going to get too much into that, but it's just something to keep in mind when we're going through this about, the actual age of this civilization. All right. So this is an amazing explanation and summary of Tartaria, of the history, I guess you could say, from what we know. And this comes to us from neverwasmag.com. So, the lost empire of Tartaria is the most delightful conspiracy theory. It poses that a technologically advanced civilization spanned Eurasia and perhaps parts of North America until as recently as a century ago. when it was erased from history. What's left of Tartaria are ornate and seemingly out of place structures, from opulent churches in Russia to the Shanghai Bund. The theory stems from disappointment in modern architecture. We once had a fabulous Art Deco skyscrapers, Beaux Arts train stations, and Second Empire post offices. Now everything is a glass and concrete box. What happened? The theory is that Americans and Europeans did not build those monuments. They are the legacy of a Tartarian empire that emanated out of Northeast Asia. Are we supposed to believe that 18th century map makers drew a vast Tartaria in that region of out of ignorance? Surely not. Tartaria was real, and it was the most powerful empire of its time. The Great Wall of China was built not by the Chinese to keep the barbarians out, but by the Tartarians to keep out the Chinese.
Hmm.
Opinions are divided about the empire's demise. Some believe a biblical sized mud flood decimated Tartaria, which also explains why so many old buildings have what we now call semi basements. Adherent of this story, suspect monuments like St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow's Red Square continue tens or even hundreds of meters underground. Others suspect World War II was really a war of all against Tartaria, and the destruction of Old Berlin, Dresden, Warsaw, and other cities in Central and Eastern Europe was a deliberate effort to wipe away the traces of a rival civilization. Whatever the catalyst, after this great reset, history was rewritten by the victors, and the surviving Tartarian buildings were recast as the creations of contemporary architects. What had been Tartaria's moving capital was implausibly reimagined as World's Fairs. How else to explain that? Every few years during the late 19th and early 20th century, palatial complexes emerged all over the northern hemisphere for entertainment? Question mark. And then they would be demolished after the event was over. That makes no sense. And we'll get into all of this throughout, but I feel like that was a great summary of kind of what we're going to get into and what Tartaria actually is.
It really doesn't make any sense. Why would you go put all that work into building those beautiful, amazing structures just to demolish them after the World's Fair? That doesn't make any sense.
And we'll get into plenty of that. So,
Yeah, we're gonna get into that.
what can be proven is that Tartaria is connected with the Mongol Empire. Basically, we have documents that the Chinese history book that we referenced earlier even proves that, but it's definitely tied in with the Mongol Empire. And that comes up in a number of books that already have been written about Tartaria. So this is really interesting. This is a map from a Ming Dynasty Chinese world map from the 1400s. From the 1400s, a Chinese map that depicts not only North America, but Antarctica as well. Things that weren't supposed to be discovered yet, especially not by the Chinese. So if this map is accurate, then this is evidence that the Chinese had knowledge of the entire planet. And it's
Right.
interesting that this map also shows that a round planet and not a flat disk.
Uh-oh.
But there's that, but if that's true, that means that the Chinese, Mongols, Tartarians had knowledge of the world and were potentially a global civilization.
Right.
And so might as well talk about this. Everywhere you look online, there seems everyone thinks that Tartaria has something to do with flat Earth. But through all of our research, we literally couldn't find a connection. And I was
There's
looking.
there's no connection whatsoever.
There is no
None.
connection whatsoever. Now, the only thing that I could come up with, well, the only connection I could find is this t-shirt, and that's why I put it there.
Right. Other than this t-shirt.
Um, so the only connection, the only thing I can come up with is that whenever you type in Tartarian maps on Google, flat Earth maps come up also, which I think is done by design by Google to make you think they're connected. For I don't know why flat Earth maps come up whenever you type in Tartaria. That's the only thing that I can find. But when you look at the flat Earth map, it says nothing about Tartaria. When you look at the Tartaria map, it says nothing about flat Earth. And then I've even gone to the channels that like are titled Tartaria Flat Earth, and I would go and there's the people talk about both of them, but there is zero connection.
Yeah, it just seems like for whatever reason, a lot of the flat Earth people love this conspiracy theory. They love the Tartaria topic, so it's like it gets combined with the flat Earth stuff just because a lot of the for whatever reason it's like they feel like they can really grab onto this also, and they're like, oh yeah, Tartaria. Um, so because of that, you just see it pop up in a lot of like flat Earth channels and flat Earth people. But when you look into the information itself, there is no connection to flat Earth. It does not. Tartaria is not like when you're looking into it that it proves all that stuff, or when you're looking into flat Earth that it proves like there's no connection. It just happens to be that a lot of like the flat Earth people are also very into Tartaria for whatever
Right.
reason.
Which is interesting, that whole theory. We won't spend much time on it. But somebody under our last webinar, they said, I have to respectfully disagree with you. I believe the earth is flat. And because that's what woke me up. That's what kicked off my awakening, was learning about the flat earth. And I'm like, that's interesting. So whether or not like it's true information or not, it's still playing a role in expanding
Right.
the consciousness. So,
Like that's great. I love that. That's
right,
great that it was a catalyst for your awakening, but that also does not necessarily mean the information is true. It just happened to be the catalyst to break you out of
right,
that the mainstream box and the matrix box, which is great. So at least it's doing that for people. That's great.
right.
But at a certain point, you got to really go back and reevaluate even everything after your awakening of what you thought
But
might be
I
true
mean,
because
this,
you know
if anything, we got evidence of a globe here, you know,
right.
if we're
If
talking about,
anything, I would say it disproves flat Earth because
right,
there's stuff like this that comes up that
right.
look, it's a globe, it's showing a globe.
So either way, I'm sure somebody out there might know something that we don't. They're, throwing up their arms right now. Yes, it is connected. Maybe it
Oh,
is. I don't
we're,
know.
I mean, we're the flat earthers are raging, I'm sure.
Okay, so
Sorry.
we had
Sorry,
evidence.
guys.
So that map showed that the Chinese had knowledge of the entire planet, including North America. So we have actually ancient Chinese symbols that had been found in North America. In New Mexico, these are Chinese symbols that were found in New Mexico, ancient petroglyphs. And then in Arizona, there was over 150 Chinese symbols found carved in Arizona, and they're at least 800 years old. So this, if if that map is accurate and these petroglyphs are real, then that is the evidence that the Chinese, the Mongols, the Tartars were here in North America.
Despite what the Smithsonian wants to have you believe.
You can read this one if you'd like, Aaron.
The official history is hiding a major world power which existed as late as the 19th century. Tartary was a country with its own flag, its own government, its own language, and its own place on the map. Its territory was huge, but somehow quietly incorporated into Russia and some other countries. This country you can find on the maps predating the second half of the 19th century.
And this is courtesy of
Courtesy.
Julia Galasso. She does a lot of Tartarian research, and she has a YouTube channel. I think it's Julia Common, actually. And I'll actually link her channel to in the description. I didn't put any links yet, but she has some good videos, and she's done a presentation even at a few conferences on Tartaria. This is actually from her presentation, and I asked her if I could use this. So, and it's, what did that just say? It was a country with its own flag, its own government, its own language, and its own place on the map. Well, here's the flag. So there's a
There it
flag and
is.
a crest. And the flag and crest. The emperor's flag contained a griffin on a yellow background, and the crest of Tartary depicted an owl. There are multiple publications listing the country of Tartaria and its flag and crest. So just interesting that this shows up quite a bit whenever you're researching Tartaria. It even had its own flag that has a griffin on it, which is going to come into play also. And the owl, which is very interesting on the Tartarian crest. This is just a closer look at the flag and crest. So the Qing Dynasty flag actually is very similar. And the Qing Dynasty existed between 1644 and 1911, was founded by a Northeast Asian people called themselves the Manchus. But either way, so the Qing Dynasty comes from the same time era that Tartaria was supposed to exist. And it's no coincidence, in my opinion, that that flag is very similar to the Tartarian flag. a yellow flag with a dragon-like figure on it.
Yeah, not a coincidence.
And the Qing dynasty is literally the exact area that Tartaria was supposed to have existed. You could even see the Great Wall of China here and everything. So just an interesting connection there. The
Also,
Chinese.
the Great Wall of China is massive. Like we learn about it, and it's just it's easy to just be like, oh, it's a wall, it's whatever. But it's huge. Like the civilization that built that thing, in my opinion, had to have been advanced
Right. And we actually have
because it's just massive. Like there's just no way. There's just no way a civilization that was not advanced built that wall. It's massive.
right. And we have a few slides about that coming up, so we can get into
Right.
that once those
We're gonna
show
get
up.
into that.
So what's interesting is some of you guys may know about these books that were gifted to me about the history of St. Louis, and these books are from the late 1800s and early 1900s, and they contain a lot of interesting information. But the founder of St. Louis, Pierre St. Laclede, this was the Laclede coat of arms, which is a griffin, which has two griffins. So which is interesting because he comes from that part of the world. So this is from the book. This is what he looks like. The discovery of the original portrait of Laclede followed the World's Fair. In a measure, this discovery may be attributed to the stimulus which the World's Fair gave to historic research along the lines of very little was known, even by the St. Louis descendants of Laclede, about his origin or early life until after the World's Fairs. But what's interesting about this guy is he comes from France. No one knows anything about him. He brings this symbol to St. Louis, the Laclede coat of arms with the griffin on it. And his son is actually the one who was responsible for planning or hosting the St. Louis World's Fair. It's this very interesting connection there. We're just going to briefly run through some of the stuff in that book because we could pick any city in the North America to use as a reference, but I figure why not just keep it close to home and share information that we actually have from these books. So he was a Freemason or a Knights Templar even, and
Shocking.
so was everyone that founded America. Literally everyone. And that's one of these
Right.
things these books actually show and list all the founders of St. Louis and all the cities all over the country. And they are all, and when I say all of them are part of some secret society. This entire country was founded by secret societies.
Yep.
But and it was also built by the Masons. So we have this part of the book that talks about the master bricklayers, the master builders association, the master painters, the master plasterers, the master plumbers, the master in chancery. So it just goes on and talks about like everybody who actually built the city, the original city, were Freemasons. Not just
Tyler,
free.
real quick.
Yeah.
Just while I'm seeing it in the chat, Clarence Stewart said, "Fun fact about the Great Wall of China: all the lookouts faced China."
Yes, that's very
So
true.
that one fact alone, to me, also proves that it was not built by the Chinese. Because why would the lookouts face inward to them? That doesn't make any sense.
And the steep sides of the wall are on the Chinese side. So you would want
Right.
the steep sides on the other side, right?
The other, you would want on the other side if it was
Yeah.
right.
So we have a country that was founded by the Freemasons, and we'll get into that. But these secret societies seem to come into play a lot with a lot of these ancient structures that we're going to be getting into. The Masonic orders, so these alone were some of the societies or the orders that were involved with St. Louis. The Royal Arch Masonry, the Cryptic Masonry, the Knights Templar, the Scottish Rite, the Mystic Shrine, the Eastern Star, the Colored Masons. And it goes on to say that the original first Grand Lodge was actually in Missouri. There were Masonic lodges, but the very first Grand Lodge was actually in Missouri. And there's just such an interesting history there. Okay, getting back to Tartaria here. So this is from the General History of China, that book we referenced earlier that actually listed Tartary as a country. They also talk about the Tartarian language in this book. Well, I'm not going to read this, but this basically it just talks about them having their own language, and this is more evidence of that. And then we're just going to go through some of the maps that we found that have Tartaria on it. This is one of them. You can't really see it is because it's so small. But there it is. And some of these maps, I don't really know the origin of them. It's just interesting that it shows up on all these maps. I'm just going to flip through some of them just to give you guys some examples that it's not just a theory. It's literally, this is a map from 1693 that shows the Tartar Empire. And here that they even had a sea, the Tartarian Sea.
Aryan Sea.
And this is another really interesting map from 1592, again, depicting a globe, but it shows Tartaria, but not only does it show Tartaria, it actually shows a hole at the North Pole
Mm,
where four rivers converge,
right. And it's showing the whole going into inner Earth or the hollow Earth, as we've already
or
covered.
the land beyond the poles, which is in the planet,
Right,
inside the
which
planet.
is the hollow Earth, which is inside the planet, not beyond an ice wall or anything like
So,
that. It's inside the planet.
and this is where we get into the cover up. So Tartaria disappears off maps around 1850. In the 1850s, it stops showing up. You really can't find any maps that have Tartaria on it after that, after 1850. But guess what? Guess what comes right after that? 1859, Charles Darwin's theory of evolution is introduced to the world. So they wipe out Tartaria from the maps. They erase uh, global advanced civilization, and then they introduce the theory of evolution to the masses. And why did we forget our true history? Well, we'll get into that later, but I don't think it's a coincidence at all that it disappears off the maps in 1850, and then right after that,
Right.
we have the theory of evolution, which
Right.
Tartaria can't be true if the theory of evolution is true. So,
Right. And also the whole Darwinian the whole philosophy behind that is the survival of the fittest, is competition, is like kill or be killed, which what do we know of the cabal? That is their mindset. Kill or be killed, survival, that they think they're the fittest and they're like, oh, we got to do what we got to do to survive. So we're going to kill all of you. We're going to do all this stuff. So you can even see like it fits in with their whole psychology and their whole mindset and philosophy. And
precisely.
they try to introduce that to the whole world so we can be easily led by their agendas. And you see that
Right.
over and over throughout history. They try to present us with their mind, give us their mind and the way they think, and the way they're taught, what we're taught in schools. What we're
Right.
uh, the Darwinian stuff, like, oh, you're just a random, came randomly from apes, and you're just a talking ape and useless eaters, blah blah blah.
Right.
You got to kill or be killed. It's all just about survival, nothing more. You can just
Right.
see.
Well, once we get into the orphan train stuff, you can kind of see why they have that mentality if that information is true. So, which is very fascinating and one of my favorite parts of this webinar. So
Right.
we're going to move on to Marco Polo now. Marco Polo actually wrote about the Tartars from his travels in
Right.
1271. I'm not going to read all this, but Polo describes the Tartars, the Turks, and the Mongols of Central Asia who composed most of the Kublai Khan's armies. Regardless, there's mention of the Tartars from his travels. So there's more evidence if we're going to believe Marco Polo. Now, a lot of people
Right.
don't believe Marco Polo because what he found was absolutely insane. A bunch of strange creatures that aren't supposed to exist, things from myth and legend, things from fairy tales. And he actually, a quote, I did not write half of what I saw, for I knew I would not be believed. If you just look at the cover of his
Right.
book in detail, it shows, I mean, there's so many different, it depicts so many different creatures on there. Uh, just stuff that isn't supposed to exist, right? Including gnomes, which is really interesting, the gnome connection and centaurs and dragons and unicorns and griffins and,
And people, beings that looked like a person with the head cut off, but the face is in their chest,
Yeah,
whatever you call that.
right. So I actually, this is actually stolen from Edge of Wonder Instagram. They did a brief segment or a brief post about Marco Polo's magical creatures.
Marco Polo described in great detail the strange creatures he saw in his lifetime of travels. But these mysterious beings shouldn't exist according to the official historical account of our world. Could they be real? Marco Polo described beings with heads like dogs and teeth and eyes likewise. In fact, in the face, they are all just like big mastiff dogs. They have a quantity of spices, but they are a most cruel generation and eat everybody that they can catch, if not of their own race. So that's a little scary. Red-haired creatures called blemmies were first mentioned in the histories written by Greek historian Herodotus. He called them headless creatures with eyes in their chests.
And that's who you were talking about.
That's what I was just describing.
And talk about a weird creature, right? It's it's so interesting. The one on the left looks like a photo almost. I mean, if that's what they looked like, can you imagine? I mean, I don't even know what to say to that. Uh,
If it's not a photo, it's a painting then because
right. Either way, like it's
either
still
way,
if let's just pretend these creatures were real.
either way,
Um,
who's just depicting that for no reason,
where does it
right?
come from? Right.
Right, where does it come from?
And I mean, Marco Polo basically, if you want to believe him, he wrote about what he saw. It wasn't anything that he made up, you know.
Right.
And then we have these creatures that actually show up on all these ancient maps as well. If you start looking at these maps and zooming in, all these creatures are there. They're on these old world maps. Things that don't even make sense. They look like something that was created in a lab, right? I mean, we got this, Shiva looking character here. This almost stork looking. It's like a guy with like a bird neck and a head. This multi-eyed being, which I think is depicted in like the Never-Ending Story. Centaurs.
Well, supposedly, a lot of people say in Atlantis times, they were doing a lot of this stuff where they were genetically manipulating different
But
species and mixing species and creating these monster-like beings, just like we're seeing here. So,
actually, that's a very interesting connection. Yeah, and which
right,
would might explain these.
right. So
Yeah,
these beings probably all go back to Atlantis times, and maybe a lot of them went underground. Maybe I mean a lot of them might have even
and
gone off planet. Who knows? Like they're obviously kind of in hiding now, but
And by the
um,
way, this is like I think it's a Russian world map from 1493, but it's like it's not available on Google or on any image search. It is, but you won't find it just typing in this map. We actually had to screenshot this map from a video we saw and then reverse image search it to even find it.
mhm.
I could not find this map anywhere online, but this is 1493 depicting these wild, crazy creatures. The recent past, the Great Wall of Tartaria or China. Around 1812, Grand Tartary is replaced by the Russian Empire, but there is still the independence in Chinese Tartary, sometimes East and West Tartary. And by 1860, Chinese Tartary becomes a Chinese empire, and the remaining Russian Tartary, roughly the same area as the independent Tartary on some maps, disappears around 1880. So there's those dates again, maybe not exactly 1850, but in the mid to late 1800s, it's we're seeing it disappear from the maps. And yeah, built by the Tartarians to keep the people out. It remains unknown the true origins of the Great Wall. Also, there's some people claim to, have all the answers about the Great Wall, but if you really dig into it, I think the original part, it's been added on to
Right.
many times actually by many groups of
Mhm.
people, but the original portion of it, I don't know if there's an actual date.
They built the Great Wall in what is now China. Marco Polo wrote an extensive and detailed account of Asia in the 13th and 14th centuries and did not even mention a wall. The Great Wall is not seen on any maps predating the late 1600s. So most of its construction occurred in the 1700s, and it was built to keep the encroaching Chinese out of Tartaria. The openings on the wall are on the north side towards the former Tartary, not on the south China-facing side. It should be called the Great Wall of Tartaria. So that's what Clarence in the comments was mentioned earlier, that all the lookouts are actually facing China.
Right.
So if it was built by China, they wouldn't put the lookouts facing themselves. They would put it facing out so they can see out. So that
Right.
doesn't make any sense. So it clearly was built by something on the other side. That's on the other side of the wall, which would have been
And
Tartaria.
it is interesting that Marco Polo didn't mention it. So maybe it's
Right.
not as ancient as we think,
And it
but
was never mentioned in the 13th, 14th centuries or before the
right.
1600s. So that leads us to believe it wasn't around. That maybe it was, but it
Right.
looks like it wasn't, because why would it just not be mentioned at all
Exactly.
before then?
And who actually built it? Right.
And who actually built it?
So is all this stuff bullshit or not? Well, according to the CIA, it's not. And
Right.
this is from a CIA document from 1957 that literally talks about the cover up. And there's way more to it than this, but I'm just going to read this one part for the sake of time. The history of Tartaria to liquidate serious shortcomings and mistakes of a nationalistic character committed by individual writers and historians in dealing with Tartar history. In other words, Tartar history was to be rewritten, let us be frank, was to be falsified in order to eliminate references to Great Russian aggressions, and to hide the facts of the real course of the Tartar-Russian relations. And this was no isolated case. In every Muslim area within the USSR, historians, on orders of the Communist Party, have rewritten history to distort the facts so that the Russians appear always in a good light. Needless to say, histories which present the facts truthfully have been withdrawn and destroyed, so that the present and future generations of Muslims are forever denied the chance of learning the true facts of their nation's past. Sounds like something that you would not read in a CIA document,
Right.
but here it is. And
But this is a real CIA document.
you can go to cia.gov/library and type this in. And
See it for
if you
yourself.
if you want to screenshot this, you can. But you can go.
On their website. It's a real
Right.
document.
I mean, that's proof positive right there.
Right.
And actually, this is from a comment from our friend Kira Sands. She is a loyal Patreon, and this is something she commented when under the thumbnail whenever we posted this a while back. I just posted it here because I think that she makes a great point. It makes sense to me that titans of industry like JP Morgan and Rockefeller would use their unlimited resources to destroy any and all evidence they could of the prospect of things like free energy and anything else that could challenge their wealth and ideals. Rockefeller himself was quoted saying that he doesn't want to create a society of thinkers, he wants to create a society of good workers. So that just goes right along with the cover up. They're already shifting things that serve their agenda.
They don't want us knowing free energy is a thing that already exists. So they have to wipe out anything related to it, which includes Tartaria, of course.
So one of the big theories with Tartaria is that the golden age already occurred and we missed it. The 1,000 years of Jubilee of we missed it and it's not coming. That they think that we're in the apocalyptic times and we already missed the golden age. That's the
Well,
theory.
well, I think it's also coming. There is
Right.
another coming
The-
as well.
But I only bring this up because that is something that comes up when you start researching Tartaria. They claim that, we missed the golden age. It already happened. And that's
Maybe
where
what's
all
referenced like in the Bible, the 1,000 years of peace.
right.
Maybe that's what it was referencing.
Did
Right.
well that and then that's what it gets into. So they're saying
Right.
that 1,000 years were inserted of false history was inserted into our timeline. So this is a quick little video I'll play. This picture on the left here, it shows the same building but with two different dates on it. And the building on the right has an M in front of it. And it says by adding one M, they have inserted 1,000 years of false history into our timeline. To how many buildings have this been done? And I'll play this quick video for you.
So why add 1,000 years? How does that help or change anything? It changes everything. It allows 1,000 years of nonsense into the narrative. It allows cowboys and Indians. It allows doubt to creep in. It allows them to explain the St. Peter's Basilica. It allows the evolution theory to be possible to the individual that hasn't done any research of their own. It allows fake characters and fake stories. It allows Columbus to discover America, which we all know is not true. So why would any of it be true? An old world civilization was wiped out and their buildings remain. Thank you for joining me for episode 21 of My Lunch Break. I hope you're all having a great day, and if you're new, welcome.
So that is from a YouTube channel called My Lunch Break, and I actually really recommend going and subscribing to that channel. Really good information about Tartaria. So the theory is that all these ancient dates, these buildings with the dates on them, it's not a number one, it's a letter I. And there's usually like a dot or a colon or something between or a dash between the I and the rest of the numbers. And a lot of people are saying that I doesn't mean one, and they've made us think that we're in a year that we're not, and they've added 1,000 years to history. And the explanation for the I and on Wikipedia is that the modern digit one did not become widespread until the mid 1950s. As such, many older typewriters do not have a dedicated key for the numeral one might be absent, requiring the use of the lowercase letter I or uppercase I as substitutes. So that does not explain, they're not using a typewriter on a stone building.
Stone on coins.
Right. And coins
Right.
and stone. It's just really interesting to me.
So it's a typical BS explanation because they have to come up with something. So they're
And
like,
there
oh
might
yeah,
be
the typewriters didn't have a one, so they used
and
no.
there might be more to this explanation. There might be something that explains it that we just don't know, but
Right, but
it's either way, it's interesting to me. So just imagine if we aren't in the 2000s right now, if we're in the 1000s right now. If this is true, then 1999 would have been 999, and this would be the year 1023 right now.
I mean, if you think about it, how many times throughout history have they changed the way we calculate time or the way we keep track of time? I mean,
Mhm.
the Gregorian calendar wasn't around forever. That started at a certain
Right,
point. And then they changed it because if you look at the months, they're not in line with the number of the month. Like September, Sept is 7, but it's the ninth month.
right.
October, Oct is 8, but it's the 10th month. November, 9, but it's the 11th. So clearly, and when you look at the months that were inserted that shifted it all. And also we should have, if anything, we should have 13 months because of the 13 moon cycles, but we only have 12. So they deliberately, mess with things to throw us off. But they've done this already, which is a fact that, that they're like, oh, suddenly now we're keeping track of time this way. So why wouldn't they be able to just insert 1,000 years on the time? Eventually, everyone just thinks that's the date. Like it'd be super easy to do.
And we're going to get into why we think or how we think they pulled this off. And,
Right.
and that comes later with the orphan trains. But okay, so we're going to jump over to Poland real quick because in Poland right now, there are mounds called the Tartar Mounds that are still standing. And our friends, we have friends who actually grew up in this exact area and they used to play on these mounds. And they reached out to us and told us about these mounds and they sent us these pictures and they grew up in this area and said we used to play on them and there was a lot of local history about these mounds that we didn't know. And I asked her if she could send me some notes about what she knew about these mounds just from growing up in the area. And and she did. So these are all structures right around the same area that are in that Tartar Mound region. Just absolutely proof that there's an advanced ancient civilization who's working with stone, like we know already. But these are all from Poland. And this is a star fort from Poland, which we'll get into some star forts briefly here. But star forts come up a lot in the Tartarian narrative as well, and they are all over the world. And there's so many explanations on what they could have been. Most likely, they were some sort of a technology. Obviously, the shape served a purpose. A lot of them worked with water, and they had aqueduct systems. They weren't just a random design, that's for sure. And what's interesting here is you can see the Google Earth image, but whenever you use LiDAR on it, look how amazing that looks.
Yeah.
And here's some, these are all in Poland still, some star forts. That's just incredible, right?
And very beautiful sacred geometry, like
Right.
very specifically designed in these
And
sacred geometry
and
patterns.
that mound on top, like I'm telling you, what we're gonna get into next is how all this stuff wasn't just built for no reason. Like the significance was that there were machines, and these are
Mhm.
technology. In the structures themselves were a technology.
Right.
These are her notes that she sent me, and I'll just briefly read through these. So, the Tartar Mound in Poland was formed for the Tartarian leader Khan, Genghis Khan, which he comes up a lot, actually, which we didn't get into that, but he comes up a lot in the Tartarian history. Genghis Khan, who died in battle. They found a burial room, some bones and coins, possibly so much more. I couldn't find any more information. There was a small shrine with a dome on top of the mound, and I think the shrine might have been for Genghis Khan. A lot of people don't know where he was buried. That's still unknown, but this is one possible explanation. But the shrine is also for harvesting natural electromagnetic energies, etc. There were more mounds around Tartar Mound, pretty damaged but built in a similar way. They played a role as landmarks, observation, and astronomical points connected to the underground tunnels, constructions, or caves. Tartar Mound is connected to fortresses and bunkers or castles. The fortresses, forts played a role in the protection, the star-like shaped wall, creating natural vibrational frequency ecosystem, very often built close to water. There are many different mounds, pyramids, stone mounds in Europe and all over the world believed to be created by the Tartarians. Romania has a lot of mounds, mountains, formations believed to be built by giants. We're going to get into giants also, but giants definitely played a role in this whole narrative, in this history, I should say. They found many giant skeletons, treasures in a small village named Tartaria. They actually found very old tablets in a ritual pit named Tartarian tablets, possibly older than the Sumerian ones. Tartar comes from Western European languages, Native Americans, Mongolians, descendants of Tartary. So that's interesting. The Native Americans are Mongolian descendants of Tartary. That's really interesting to think about. And then if you actually get
Mm.
into the Native American history, the Native Americans had secret societies also, which is I didn't
Mhm.
know about until very recently. And they actually knew some of the hand symbols and gestures when the Europeans came over. Apparently, there was like a hidden handshakes being done between Native Americans and some of the Europeans to tell them that they were like a part of this society already. And that's kind of how they were working together, possibly. And that's why where our Constitution came from, the Iroquois Confederacy. There's a whole another narrative here that the Native Americans also had their own secret societies. So this is very
Yeah.
interesting stuff. The so-called Dark Ages were actually a very enlightened period thanks to the Tartar Empire. The Berlin Zoo, which I find very interesting, the Berlin Zoo, Tartaria designed it to save almost extinct species around the world. Caroline instrument, 68 bells at the zoo. So there's 68 bells at the zoo associated with harmonizing and healing power of the electromagnetic current for the plants, animals, and people. So these are just all of her notes. Thank you so much for sharing these with me. I don't know if she wants me to mention her name or not, so I won't, but
And I
um,
like how the Dark Ages were actually a very enlightened age thanks to the Tartar Empire. So, as we know, they invert everything, right?
right.
Black is white, up is down, left is right. They invert everything. So, they call it the Dark Ages. So, we don't know that it was actually the opposite of that. They inverted it.
Right. And this is the only star fort we're going to cover in North America. And it's only because one of my friends went there and shared some very interesting information with me. So this is the one in St. Augustine, Florida. And this is exactly what she sent me. And I'm just going to read it verbatim what she said. I went to the Star Fort in St. Augustine in September. It's made out of coquina block. It's a big part of the tour about how strong and impenetrable it is. There's still a cannonball embedded into the coquina, which simply absorbed the shock of all the attacks and never broke. On the tour, they say that coquina required a 3 year process of cutting it, letting it dry just to the right degree, being cut by stonemasons who came over from Spain, then being put into place in the design, blah, blah. I went home and researched coquina, and according to mainstream sites, it's actually considered a terrible material for building because it falls apart or shatters so easily, with one notable exception, the coquina at the Star Fort in St. Augustine. So coquina is basically seashells, fossilized seashells that like just in very fine particles, and when you compact them, it makes a building material. So it's interesting that it's known to be a terrible building material, but they use it to build the Star Fort, one of the most impenetrable constructions we know of. But what's interesting is what makes that possible? How is that possible? Were they
Right.
using tartaric acid maybe as the filler? Maybe they had some knowledge of that acid and they were using it to harden this coquina to make it impenetrable. Maybe.
Maybe. Why would that one structure be the only one that's
Right.
super strong? Doesn't make any sense otherwise.
Right. Very interesting. And as we just mentioned, the Tartarian tablet, well, here's what it looks like. There's actually three of them. And they, according to even mainstream, these are acknowledged, believe it or not, as legitimate artifacts. And they are dated back to, well, the Sumerian tablets are dated back to 3500 BC. These are dated back to 5500 BC. So that makes them older than the Sumerian tablets, which we're told it's common knowledge basically that the Sumerian text is the oldest text and writing that we have. But what's interesting is that this was discovered in Alba County, Romania, or Tartaria, which it literally in 1961, by the way, these were discovered in 1961 and dated back to 5500 BC. So far, the oldest documented language on the planet, which that's debatable. But here's Google Earth, and it literally says Tartaria.
In Romania, it says
In in
Tartaria.
right in Romania, it
What
says
a
Tartaria.
coincidence.
Yeah. And here it is again. And that's exactly where these artifacts were found. And here's a artist depiction of them so you can get a better look. And there are some people that claim to know what they say and have translated them, but it's all debatable as always. But no coincidence. I mean, I just think it's amazing that it literally says Tartaria on Google Earth. And then here's a quick little video we're going to play that's going to segue us into the next part.
They didn't build all these massive ancient buildings in Los Angeles. They were already here. They've been here for thousands of years. Go downtown Los Angeles and New York and Utah, Salt Lake City and San Francisco. Those buildings were already there. They just co-opted them. Captain Cook went to Australia and put the Rothschild Windsor flag on the British Union Jack flag on the Aboriginal land. But they were already in their buildings in Sydney and Melbourne. They were already there.
You're saying some of these buildings are thousands of years old?
Tartarian. They were from Tartar.
Even California was Tartarian?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
the whole world.
I hear that like it's a new thing in truth seeking is the lost kingdom or kingdoms of Tartaria.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not that much information on them, but there's a lot of old maps. And I thought it was mostly in Russia. No?
It comes from Russia, and just near Moscow to the east, you'll see modern day Tartar. It's the Tartar Empire, which is not legally in Russia, but physically in Russia. When the Bolsheviks from Wall Street destroyed Russia and killed 100 million Christians and set up the godless atheist Bolshevik Russian system, what they did was they destroyed the Tartarian
Empire.
Yes, they destroyed the last vestiges, and even in Germany, Dresden and all of that, that was Tartaria. They had to destroy America, Russia, and Germany. Why? Because they were just too advanced in Tartarian free energy, magnetism. Now we've got an electrical grid. Before, all of those turrets and tors and all those beautiful highly ornamented Edwardian and Georgian so-called buildings were harvesting magnetic energy. Right, so what they did was, to enslave people, you've got to make them pay for their energy, for their food and everything. Before it was free, we had free energy, free food, everything was free. So what they did was they struck a deal with each other, let's do this, right? So the Colonna family, they went westward, and the Genovese, and the Venetians, they went eastward. They controlled Turkey all the way to China. You know, they sent people like Marco Polo out and, you know, to do discovery and in all of those places. But what they did was controlled their ports. It was very important for them not to control the lands and everything. Like Rothschild said, I don't care who makes the laws, I want to control the purse strings, the money.
The money.
Imagine what you'll know tomorrow.
Here we go. That gets us into these structures being a technology that was designed in order to obtain free energy from the atmosphere. So all these old world buildings, they were so intricate, and I don't think this was just for decoration. And these diagrams, they show. They had an antenna, conductor, they were using mercury, there was a resonator, the frequency was being generated by the bells, there was conduits, there was a transformer, and there are harmonizers, there was energy storage. They were literally obtaining free energy from the atmosphere with these old structures, and they serve many purposes, which we're going to get into. So this is actually really interesting. This is a temple creating free energy. You have to look really closely at this video, but it depicts, it literally shows, if you look at the top of that temple, some sort of etheric energy being harnessed. I mean, that's just incredible to me.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you can see it there.
right.
You can physically see it.
If it's a real video, which I have no
If it's-
reason to believe that it isn't.
Assuming it's a real video, which, yeah.
And the old world paradise. Here are two old world wireless energy towers kept as artifacts today. The technology was at its peak in the recent past. I don't know the history of these two towers, but they do appear to be some sort of a wireless energy tower. I don't have any information on them, but I did find it interesting, and it's just another example. And this building on the right, this is a Tartarian style building to harvest electricity from the atmosphere. Every stone of such constructions have a specific mixture, a specific role to play, like a gear in a machine. If you do something wrong, the machine will stop working. There are architectural structures like this all over the world, and they all were rebuilt and modified for the New World after the reset in the 1800s. Buildings in this style are not normal. They aren't religious buildings either. These buildings are machines. And I tend to agree with that.
I absolutely agree with that.
I'm in construction, and they're not going to spend money. No one's going to spend any money that they don't have to. And to build something like that would cost time and money that the world
Time, money, labor, energy, like
yeah, that
for
the
no
world doesn't
reason. That
have
doesn't
today.
right. That doesn't make any sense. They wouldn't just do all that for no reason. I mean, maybe once in a blue moon because some rich person paid for it, you know, because they wanted it to look but like all of the buildings like that, no.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense unless it's a technology.
Precisely. And then I'm sure you guys have seen these floating around the internet, cathedral windows compared to cymatic sound frequencies. If you look at the very left, we have examples of cathedral windows. And then just to the right of that are piano notes. Very, very similar to the cathedral windows. And this goes also to the African stone circles that Michael Tellinger talked about. He found these random stone circles all throughout Southern Africa, and he determined that the stone circles were actually built in the design of the cymatics of the frequency in that area. So they were working with sound technology in ancient times, even.
Yep.
And
Sacred geometry,
right.
cymatics, sound frequency. Nikola Tesla, what did he say? Everything is frequency, energy, and vibration. They had that knowledge back then. You can just see, like, it's very obvious when you understand this stuff. You just look at it and you're like, yep, they knew this stuff. It's like, yep,
Right.
that was the technology. you know.
So here's more examples, and I only show this because of one thing. It's hard to read, but I'll read it for you guys. Cymatic frequencies of human vowel sounds at the very top row. So human vowels, which is interesting how the vowels are such a key part of our language. And then they have the cymatic frequencies of a human DNA cell, human DNA. It all looks so similar. It's just amazing. And then you have these cathedral windows that are said to be designed to actually heal our bodies. So, and then these are piano notes here. These dark blue ones are all different piano notes. And then below that are cathedral windows. And then below that are stained glass windows. So, no coincidence. These are technology that we were not told about.
Right.
And then this is interesting. So this picture on the left is a modern printed desktop circuit of a Schumann resonator. So it's a resonator that plays the Schumann resonance.
Which is the resonance of the Earth, of our
Right.
planet.
But then this here on the right is the floor of the Chartres Cathedral harnessing the ether. But on the website, it's actually referred to as the labyrinth. I guess you could say this would be the cymatics or something along those lines of the Schumann resonance.
It's clearly the same
There it
thing.
is, a close up of it on the floor. But look at the inside of this cathedral, and I'm going to show you the outside of it here next. That's the building, partly built starting in 1145 and then constructed over a 26-year period after the fire of 1194. It's very interesting to me that they just write that off as the labyrinth. Oh, it's just a labyrinth that they decide to put on the floor.
For no reason. Yeah, they just
Right.
thought it looked pretty and, very specifically designed for no reason.
And
Makes
then
sense.
this is here in St. Louis. The St. Louis Basilica was construction began in 1908. And you're going to notice a lot of these buildings have two peaks, like this one shows. And there's a reason for that. Now, this is really interesting. This is the fireplaces that were supposed to be the fireplaces in these buildings.
Yeah, supposedly fireplaces, but were they more than that? So were fireplaces originally atmospheric energy gathering tech that wired the home with free etheric energy? Although at first glance it looks like a regular fireplace, further inspection reveals that they're very shallow, and instead of brick, the back of the chamber is lined with a big metal plate, typically adorned with intricate art. They also sport andirons, which do not hold log grates like modern fireplaces, but seem to serve as regulators and or transmitters. So
Regulators and or transmitters. So if it's hard to see in this photo, but if you look here, all these fireplaces have these two items here, these two objects in the front, and those could be regulators or transmitters. And if you go back to the top of this building or a lot of these buildings, which I just did a great job of putting the text right over the top of these buildings, but I think I have other
whoops.
examples. But these are regulators or transmitters, you could say. And there actually was used to harness this energy. But you can clearly look at this and see it wasn't used as a fireplace. And a lot of people that go into these buildings, the mainstream explanation is that these were decorative. They have a number of explanations for them because there's no flue either. There's not a chimney. So they couldn't figure out, and there's no evidence of an actual fire ever being built in them. But this is, I think, what was heating and cooling and powering these homes and these buildings. It was gathered from the peaks of the cathedrals and it was somehow harnessed and transmitted down into the building, into the home as a free energy that would somehow heat and cool in a means that we just don't understand.
And real quick, Jock Doubleday in the chat. What's up, Jock? He says labyrinths are 100% not mazes. They are energy machines replicated perfectly in military grade antennas. Labyrinths are energetic antennas. So even the military uses the same thing for antennas.
Thank you. And they also in the chat, thank you guys, made
Thank
mention
you
that
guys.
there's copper roofs on these buildings as well. Copper does play a huge role in all of
Right.
this.
And copper roofs. And as we know, copper is a very good conductor
Right.
of energy and electricity. So,
And this was
yeah.
built in 1908, the St. Louis Basilica, meaning they had full knowledge of this technology even then. It's not like it's been forgotten. they're building these structures. It's like the secret societies, right? They're
Mhm.
building it with the knowledge of this free energy, and who knows what they're actually using it for. But we're just supposed to believe it's just some beautiful ornate design that
Right.
represents God or something, you know.
Right. And Clarence says the dome was also key to energy production. So even the shape of the dome was very specific
And
for the energy production as well.
and what's very interesting, if you go around the country today and look at almost every city hall in every major city, they all have a dome.
Always a dome with a spire
Yeah,
coming out of it.
right. The city
Out of the top.
halls are.
City
And
Hall.
I'm telling you, there's something going on here that we just don't understand. So these are decorative furniture, right? But these are thought to be space heaters, basically. Michael Tellinger says, was it radium that powered these heaters? If this is how our recent history has been removed from our reality and knowledge, just imagine how little we know about the ancient civilizations and the hidden history of Earth. So these are very interesting to me. And the examples of these are, I mean, they're beautiful, but you can clearly see it's some sort of a technology. And these were heaters. Apparently, these were heaters. And this is how they would heat their homes. It wasn't, or you can just say, oh, it's a beautiful piece of antique furniture, which it's not. You can tell
No.
it
It's a
was used for something.
free energy heater.
And if you look at them closely, they have two little compartments at the bottom, just like the fireplaces. Like it's just some sort of a technology here. Maybe transmitters, resonators.
Whatever it was a free energy technology, clearly.
Mhm.
Like they had it. So the next question you need to ask is why don't we have it now?
Right. And then the Hindu temples, which are basically 3D printed, in my opinion. I mean, they were
Oh
done
my
with
God.
some sort of laser technology.
Yeah.
They were not built by hand.
I mean, look at those things.
And
It's
obviously, very obviously, a technology. You can even
yeah.
see what I mean. That looks like our power stations today.
Right. They look
Or
like power
yeah.
stations.
But this is a quick little video we'll play that just shows a bunch of example of these Hindu temples. Oh no, yeah, it's the next slide
And
here.
like how long it would, if they weren't in advanced civilization, like how long it would have taken them to build
Yeah.
something like that. Why there's just, I mean, it's
And
just beyond ridiculous that it
and
had to
this
have
is
been an advanced civilization that built those things.
and this is the famous stone chariot, which has been a marvel for years. But here's the video that I was thinking of. And it starts off with showing a modern stone being 3D printed. And there's no reason to believe that this isn't the exact technology that they were using for these Hindu temples. La Falsa Historia.
The
Thank
false
you.
history.
Thank you, La Falsa Historia on TikTok. So here's that building from earlier, the Burgos Cathedral in Spain. Construction started in 1221 and opened in 1260. An absolute marvel. I mean, it looks like the Hindu temples. It's just an incredible
Right.
technology. Here's another quick video of this guy kind of explaining the technology.
On my left, we have the Luna Vasahi Temple. On my right, the Large Hadron Collider. What you are seeing is the prophetic fusion of art and science invented by the Indus Valley culture. That carving is on a ceiling, and in their land you will find many of these mysterious carvings that nobody can explain. That stone ball is a different stone. That is a stone chain. That's an iron pillar that hasn't rusted for 1,600 years. That temple is carved out of the side of a mountain. That temple is the most detailed thing I've ever seen. I showed you how they encoded the acoustic knowledge into their stone pillars. But those pillars also have gear ratios, like a transmission, with perfect symmetry. Some of them even spin. There are even some you can play like a musical instrument. Their architecture resembles modern acoustic technology, that has just recently been invented. The precision of their carvings rivals that of aerospace engineering. And instead of writing all this down, they encoded all of this knowledge about the physical world into their walls. We are still discovering secrets hidden in these temples to this day. Now, I don't know if their temples were particle accelerators, but there is a reason why there is a Shiva statue outside of CERN. To my Indus friends in the East and the ones here in the States, happy Diwali. We appreciate the light.
Just incredible. And it's all finally coming to light. And by the way, this is the inside of this building. It's, I mean,
that's one of the most intricate things I've ever seen in my life. It's insane. Like he said in the video, I don't understand how anyone can possibly look at that.
Well, it's all about energy flow. It's all about the flowing of energy. So,
right.
Katie, who we just interviewed on the episode last week, she channels an ancient race, and she actually went to the St. Louis Basilica, and they looked at it. They looked at the brick on the outside. The group she was channeling, and they were amazed that they were upset. They're like, "What a waste of stone." So the way we stack bricks is actually, it's like counterintuitive to the flow of energy. So like the brick walls actually obstructs the energy. So even though it's an amazing, intricate structure, they're still like could even be more powerful if they weren't stacking bricks like they were. And that's why a lot of these ancient structures have all these bricks that there are all different shapes and sizes, and they're molded together, and none of them seem to look, it seems to be all chaotic. That was all specifically done for the flow of energy.
Right. And it makes the structure stronger by having them different sizes.
Right.
And I believe Jack Doubleday talked about that in his presentation. Jack, I believe you talked about that, correct?
Yes, he did. Yeah.
So it also makes the structure way stronger, so it lasts a lot longer than the stuff we build today that is like a joke compared to that stuff.
Right. And here's just some more examples of these buildings I think are all from the World's Fairs. Maybe not all of them. The one on the top left there is the Chicago Federal Building.
I mean, look at how intricate all that stuff is. Look at how specifically designed and beautiful and intricate.
And similar, but it's
similar.
We're looking at machines is what we're looking at.
Right.
And then here comes the bells. So history reset. Acoustic resonance had an important effect on human beings. Many bells were destroyed, buried, then replaced because they emanated a particular frequency and vibration. And here's some old schematics of some bells that clearly show it's more than just an instrument. It's a technology, and it's not even in English, so I don't know what these say, but you can look at these yourself. And it was a technology. These are part of a machine. And then this is actually a social media post from Siobhan Hill. Thank you so much if you're watching this. She said, "This is crazy. I believe humanity is open to start seeing the truth. It might be hard to look at, but all the propaganda programming is falling apart. The truth is the previous civilizations were higher dimensional. Humanity experienced a fall or devolution. Their insanity would cause them to destroy multiple systems that kept the peoples at a much higher frequency, including the land's grid, ley line, and mound pyramid system. Also, those buildings were created in a higher realm before humanity fell into the lower 3D. I want you to take note of that. Those buildings were created in a higher realm before humanity fell into the lower 3D. The whole end of this webinar is going to talk about Tartaria possibly existing in another dimension.
What's interesting about that is, for those of you that read the Law of One actually talks about the Great Pyramids in Egypt being built in a higher dimension and then manifesting into our dimension, to the third dimension. So but they said they were constructed in a higher dimension, just like Siobhan here says.
So there's the Ancient Secret, the Flower of Life. That book also talks about the pyramids being built in a different dimension. So maybe Tartaria, maybe some of these buildings were, and we're going to get into all that at the end. And it's really amazing stuff. This is Abby Lynn from our conference talking about bells and the information she was given in one of her sessions.
I wanted to show you this bell because I saw it starting to become rumored that those bells were actually healing chambers around the globe. And a lot of people ask, like, where did all the bells go? Because they used to have these huge bells. So I was in a session with somebody, and the top half of their body and the bottom half, just they weren't in alignment. They just weren't speaking to each other. And in walks the same monk who'd work with me. He said, "Put her in a bell." And this image came in my head. But all I'm here today is to say and confirm those absolutely are healing chambers, and were used for that. It brings the whole body when because it can reach those pitches and that frequency to bring the cells into alignment. And here's the thing, once your cells are in proper alignment, the body can heal itself. That's the only reason, that's the reason why the vibration comes in and the sound comes in. Once you're in a line, the body is a master healer. It knows what to do. We just have to get out of its way, which is ego. Okay, so this is evidence. I started doing some gong training, and they scientifically studied it. This is the blood cells before a gong. As you can see, they're kind of clumpy and they have these little spikes coming off of it. And this is after just 15 minutes of listening to a gong, of what it does to the red blood cells, and just importance in what these sound chambers can do.
I included that because, you know, we can talk about this stuff, but let's learn about how they're actually healing us as well. And this is another video on how these bells are healing people. We're just going to play right away.
Why did they destroy all the bells after World War II? Because if you sit in a bell and someone hits it and it begins to resonate, you can begin to heal like that. Because sound frequency instantaneously heals the body. Similar to chanting. If you any sound effect will begin to instantly structure all the body at the same time. That's what used to happen in the cathedrals. They would ring the bells or they would play the pipe organs, and all of the cells in the body would instantaneously become structured, which would instantly heal them. But they had to get rid of the pipe organs, which are made from lead, which is interesting, and they had to get rid of the bells, because both of those can heal people. Now imagine if a bell of the size was ringing in a cathedral. Now imagine the frequency that would come out of the cathedral into the town. You could heal the entire town instantaneously just by ringing the bell in the cathedral. That's why they had to get rid of them. They had to break all those bells. All the bells you ever look up. Just type in like bell in whatever country or city you're in, and notice how all the bells have a crack in them and they're broken. I wonder why that is. And people would say, oh, it's a conspiracy and it's just made up. No, there's intention. There's intention to get rid of these things so that we're dependent on a sick care system.
And that is from iamgod.cody.lynn.madison TikTok. And it is an absolutely perfect explanation.
Right. Why else would they get rid of all the bells? Why do they all have cracks? That
Right.
doesn't make any sense unless they need to get rid of them because healing, it's a technology.
And then, right, now we got to get into the water towers. What the hell are the water towers? So this on the left is an ancient water tower from 1905, 2023. Very interesting, the difference and the similarities. But so there's a theory that the water towers today are actually Tesla towers in disguise. And I actually did a small TikTok myself on this, and I'm going to play it, but I'm going to pause it a few times just to go through some of what we're looking at here. Okay, so on the left here, we have a water tower patent from 1888. On the right is a Tesla coil patent from 1890. But look, if you're looking at the above cut of the water tower, it looks very similar to the Tesla coil on the right. Now let's keep going. Modern day Tesla tower. So here we have a water tower patent from 2006, and then we have a Tesla tower patent from 1914 on the right. Very similar in construction. They have the central core. If you really compare these patents, if you flip through all the pages, there are so many similarities. It's very interesting. So this is in Fulton, Missouri. I noticed this myself. I'll let this keep playing. Okay, so I was driving to the Lake of the Ozarks, and I saw a street lamp painted on the water tower in Fulton, Missouri, and said, "Proudly serving you." And this was right around the time I was discovering that these water towers were potentially Tesla towers. And I'm like, that's so crazy that why would they put a street lamp on the water tower? And then on top of every water tower you look at, they all have antennas, every one of them, 5G antennas, everything you want. They're just strapped with them. So if there is water in there, that means they're radiating the water for one, making it cancerous. Two,
They're putting a negative frequency into the water, right?
Or two, if there isn't water in there, that these are some sort of device that is providing the free energy, and all the electrical grid out there is already being harnessed for free, and they're just charging us for it. They're not, and I think the power stations.
I think both of those things are true.
Right.
Actually.
Depending on the area. Exactly. So let's keep going here. That is one of the street lamps in Fulton, Missouri. All of the street lamps look exactly like the lamp that's painted on the water tower. Not a coincidence. And there you go. There's the water tower in the back with the street lamp painted on it, and there's a street lamp. And there's, what do you know, antennas on top of the water tower. Thank you, Nikola Tesla. So, I don't know if I'm right about the water tower thing. That's not like proof, because this is just a theory, but question everything, right?
Right.
And then that brings us to these old water towers that are still standing in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, why do the old water towers look like this? And they all have very much of a obelisk cathedral appearance to them. The Grand Water Tower in the photograph taken between 1895 and 1905, it looks like an electrical device. If you look at the top of it, it still back then had what we would call antennas on top.
Right. Why make it a giant tower like that?
Right. It had coils on top. Yeah.
With coils on top and with antennas on top.
Right.
Doesn't really make any sense unless
this is a drawing of the water tower in the town in St. Louis. So but it looks like a Tesla tower in the middle of the town. I mean, very interesting. Just some more examples of these water towers in St. Louis. And that brings us to the next point. Maybe these towers were actually charging stations for the Zeppelins. And I'm going to play a video for you here. And this whole Zeppelin thing is a rabbit hole in itself.
We're given a photo with the airships in the background in the sky. So I went digging and found this photo from 1905, World's Fair in Oregon, showing more airships. And since I haven't really covered this topic yet on this channel, in my opinion, and a few others, this form of travel was all over the place. It wasn't just created in the 1800s, and the Hindenburg event was used as a scare tactic to make these airships look faulty, removing this free energy form of transportation technology out of our lives. Do you really think that they put a gas in these airships that would be so incredibly flammable and fly them over massive cities? Or does it make more sense that this Hindenburg event was a planned event to get rid of this free form of travel and wipe it from the history books? Here we have a photo of one of these airships sitting in between the two spires of the old world building. You can see that they use these spires to electrically charge these airships, and this was common knowledge. And in the very next photo, it's leaving the port. We are not given the truth about our history. This isn't something that we are ever told about in our mainstream schooling system all over the world. Do you find that odd? Let's keep digging. We see that the US Army had this technology in the 1800s, as well as the Navy. Now, this is a photo from July of 1931, and we clearly have an airship charging at the top of this building. So we have a lot going on here, and this was within the last 100 years. An airship charging at the top of this tower. Did you think they only charged at the top of buildings? Of course not. They had charging docks in the middle of the water. Here we have a photo of the US Navy airship in 1924, charging from this boat. Now let's zoom in on this charging station to get a good look at what's going on here. Now this is a technology that we were never told about. This is hidden from our timeline, a clear proof that there is much more to the story than what we've been told, especially since this was not thousands of years ago, and shows how easily history can be rewritten. This technology should be common knowledge at this point. Here we have another angle in Rhode Island of the charging taking place. These airships were not powered by gas or simply helium. And if we switch angles here, we can actually see the charging tool that was used right at the top of this tower. They're clearly about to connect to the airship. So this, in my opinion, is clearly explaining what's going on at the top of these old world buildings. They were charging stations for the airships. They have the same features, and I guarantee you that they still turn on, since this was not that long ago. And I'm going to take this time right now to answer a lot of people's question. Will we ever find the truth? As we keep uncovering more and more documented evidence, we're going to find that the previous civilization was not that far in the past. And our current structures hold so much more technology than we ever truly understood. So in my opinion, yes, we are going to find the truth about all of this. We are uncovering the truth faster and faster. And this community gets bigger and bigger, with more and more people sharing their thoughts and knowledge. The mainstream history is becoming comedy hour at this point. So we can clearly see that these buildings all around the world may have had a second purpose, but they were without a doubt here to generate free energy, specifically for airships. And once you realize this, then we can go deeper and ask the question, was the previous civilization capable of using these buildings to power their flight that were so much more powerful, so much faster, and so much more incredible than an airship? I believe that they fully understood this technology. They were the ones that constructed it. They had this technology and were able to travel through the air so much faster than we can today while using the Earth's natural energy. These buildings are technology. They are able to extract the energy and are able to turn it into a fuel. If you're looking for a why, a motive to suppress this technology, well, it would 100% benefit a civilization, us. It's free. There is zero benefit to free transportation, free energy. Do we need to go further for the why? So when you go around your town now and see the top of these buildings, we can all understand how popular this form of transportation really was. It was everywhere.
Thank you, Adam Slides, TikTok. So I think they were used for more than just charging the airships. I think there was used also to power the structures themselves, which we talked about. But I have found this patent. This is the patent on the right. And within the patent, it's all in German, so I can't read it. And it's all blurred out. I couldn't find a clear image. But it shows connecting to these towers. So the towers are actually part of the patent. Yeah, so Jock mentioned something about the Zeppelin reminds me of the alternate reality in Fringe.
Yes. I was telling you about that the other day, Tyler. So I'm still watching Fringe. My partner and I, we've been watching it. I think we just started season 5. So much disclosure in that show. I mean, that show is just chock full of disclosure. And at a certain point in the show, they start dealing with an alternate reality that's very similar to our reality, but it's like slightly different in different ways. And one of those ways is they have Zeppelins in that reality. And they show the Empire State Building in New York, and they show a Zeppelin, just like you showed, right there, charging at the Empire State Building, and they go, oh yeah, the Empire State Building was originally built as a Zeppelin charging station. That was its main purpose for being built, and it shows the Zeppelin charging at it right there, like just like that.
Right in the show, yeah,
in the show, and they show Zeppelins flying all over the place, and people, it's like almost like they're showing you what if like some of the Tesla stuff would have gone through, and some of this free energy, what our reality would have looked like in modern day with a lot of that alternate timeline. And that was one of the things.
So that's interesting because it deals with an alternate reality, which is kind of how we're going to bring all this information home at the end. So there's another example of that.
We're given a photo.
And then it's part of the patent here. This is another quick video we'll play. This guy just explains it a little different perspective here about these Zeppelins.
So many of you confuse these airships with these dinky little blimps we have now. This was the construction of the Hindenburg. And a few cross sections to show you the massive size and scale behind these. These airships were massive, able to carry large amounts of crew, material, explore the North Pole, as you see here with the Norge, the first people to actually explore the North Pole. That is one of the big benefits over these airships from the fixed-wing aircraft we have today. Exploration, free and easy travel throughout this realm. You could set up these mooring stations here pretty much anywhere. And they were easily able to load and unload passengers right from the front hatch. Now I think these airships have been around a lot longer than they told us. Just looking at some of the detailed maps they had back then to what we have now. And now that we don't have that easy exploration option, the maps have drastically changed. It wasn't just amazing houseboats they were able to float down the rivers and waterways either. They were able to have these airships dock on boats as well. Like I said, mooring stations could be built anywhere. Could even have the airships just land on the water themselves. And I don't need the NPCs in the comments talking about, oh, they go boom, and the Hindenburg, it went blown up, it's dangerous. Yeah, take a look at the Hindenburg itself. If you actually bother researching it, see how false flaggy that looked. Again, this is all just my personal opinions though. I just want you to question everything, friends. Until next time.
The Dr. Regenerator or Regenerated, that guy has a lot of great TikToks on Tartaria and all this information. So I think that's enough time spent on the Zeppelins, but it's very interesting. And if we're talking about alternate reality, and if maybe we did shift at some point and there are some structures still remaining here, then, we're talking about something very significant that happened. And this is actually on Wikipedia, and it explains that these pink ovals inside of the airship are actually depicting hydrogen cells, which we know about hydrogen or water-powered motors today.
So maybe they were running off of water as well.
And then this is just a quick side note. Where our major airports already here. So a lot of the airports are all designed or laid out in the Freemasonry symbolism. I'm not sure which airport this is, but we're going to play a quick video talking about this as well. But this is something, like I mentioned at the very beginning, about the Sphinx in Memphis, right? That was supposed to be discovered in Memphis, Tennessee, and it actually wasn't. It was discovered in Egypt. Well, this is another photo floating around like that. They're saying that this is a photo, an original photo from the Chicago O'Hare Airport. But when you do a little bit of digging, this is a 1956 artist future rendition of a possible airport. So they're trying to say that the Chicago airport was connected. It had the same symbol as CERN, but unfortunately, it's interesting that that was the plan to shape it that way. But the photo is not real. It's an artist rendition of what it could have been. And there's a quick 40-second video we'll play talking about this.
We know that the airports are so strange, and in my opinion, especially the big ones, they were previously there, and we have added on to them. We know that the Denver airport is strange in itself, said to have many buildings that are under the ground. And when we look at the O'Hare International Airport, and we have its location and see the address, we find something very strange. Again, coded messages, even in addresses, for airports. Here we go. We see 10000 Bessie Coleman Drive, Chicago, Illinois, with a zip code of 60666.
Just an interesting side note on airports. Maybe they were always there as well. And then another common theme in these buildings were that they had gigantic doors. Look at these people standing next to these doors. And tell me, why on earth would you ever build something like that unless somebody was actually that tall?
Right. Look how massive those doors. Why would you build massive doors for no reason whatsoever? That does not make any sense.
Right. And then yes, these are even bigger. Absolutely incredible. And this is again a rabbit hole in itself. You can get into this the giant aspect of these buildings and the giant skeletons. And this is just for the heck of it, we threw in an old article of a prehistoric man, 18 feet tall in height, an old newspaper article. So we have evidence of the giants, as we already know. The discovery in Seymour, Texas, of a skeleton of an 18-foot giant with a skull 6 times larger than ours in 1919. So there we go. Who were these giants and where did they go? Thank you, Old World Zone, for this post on social media. And then this is from the documentary, the Coquille Mound documentary, but this is another document that is actual evidence. We don't have to theorize anymore. Evidence of a cover-up, just like the CIA document earlier. This is the Bureau of Ethnology's first annual report, 1879. John Wesley Powell states in this report, the willful director of the Smithsonian Institution's Bureau of Ethnology laid down the law for all professional archaeologists from the late 19th century to present Hence, it will be seen that it is illegitimate to use any pictographic matter of a date anterior to the discovery of the continent by Columbus for historic purposes. He insisted that the Americas had been hermetically sealed off from the rest of the outside world by impassable oceanic barriers until 1492.
Oh yeah,
So,
sealed off. There's no way they could
right.
possibly.
It will be seen as illegitimate to use any pictographic matter of a date anterior to the discovery of the continent by Columbus for historic purposes. That was the Smithsonian mindset right out of the gate. So anything that the Smithsonian shows you has to fit this narrative.
So that means they're literally telling you anything we come across, that does not fit that narrative, we will disregard no matter what. We will not even consider it. And anything anyone else finds, will rush in to hide that as well because it doesn't fit into. They're literally telling you this is the official approved narrative, and we will uphold it at all costs. Everything else will be hidden, squashed.
And the Smithsonian is everywhere in our schools, in our textbooks, in the History Channel, everywhere. The Smithsonian is like the stamp of approval for our history now. Obviously, we know it's bullshit, but that is what has become mainstream.
And it's connected to the government directly.
Kind of like NASA has been the stamp of approval for everything in space, right? Which we know is bullshit also.
Right.
And then to end this segment of the webinar, the St. Louis Cathedral, constructed in 1727, during a time whenever we were only supposed to have this type of technology, horse and buggy and these stick-framed buildings, the Wild West style buildings, which this era, according to mainstream Wikipedia, was supposed to have occurred between 1865 and 1895. So in 1865, we were building towns like this, these ghost town style towns, but somehow in 1727 in St. Louis, we were able to build this and the buildings next to it. But then in 100 years, we forgot how to do that, and this is all we knew. And we didn't have any technology, and we had, horse and wagon, and that's history. And this is the history that's in the textbooks.
It's like NASA. We lost the technology.
Right. Exactly. We
lost it.
We lost the moon footage.
We lost the technology to go back to the moon, which is why we haven't been in 50 years.
And then, funny meme, what history taught us what it was. And this is actually from the Chicago World's Fair, interestingly enough. And that leads us into the next segment. Oh, not yet, almost there. So one quick, this is a short video. And this is something that ties all this together and makes you really scratch your head.
We are finding the truth about our past. And the truth that this place that we live is incredible. It's filled with perfection. And we have been distracted from it for far too long. When you walk down the street, you will now see the previous civilization's work in your city because they are honestly everywhere and they deserve our attention. Henry Cobb, the first Henry that we were given, is a character that needs to be covered. Here we are given a list of buildings that Cobb is credited with knocking out over 100 years ago. There is one specifically that caught my eye, and that is the Chicago Federal Building. And let's take a look at this picture for a minute. We have shown this type of nonsense before, so let's do it again. They show this fake wagon sitting on the dirt road with more people that are identical next to each other in white. These are not real people. They are all photoshopped. If we zoom in on it, you can clearly see that they are duplicates. They are copy-pasted. And the other one is all glitched out. And who just stands in the middle of a road anyway? None of it fits in. You have a massive building, yet you have horse and wagon, and you have dirt roads. If it rains, the dirt is going to become so wet, and you will not be moving any limestone. Yet this was never an issue for the mainstream narrative. The dirt is always looking like it had just been raked and perfected for the photo. There's a dirt road down the street from my house, and they have to fix that thing all the time. Otherwise, there's massive holes in it. There are no holes in this picture. It's a perfect dirt road. I'm at the point where I'm going to say that this was prepared for the photo in our new civilization. The dirt is sitting on top of the past civilization's work. These buildings are under the dirt. They are much bigger than we can see. This is not the original road. It's all backwards. The road always comes first in construction because you need to be able to access the construction site. This is obvious stuff that the narrative ignores. Like we said, getting the materials there and the machinery would be nearly impossible with dirt roads and donkeys and wagons. If it snows or rains, then just forget about it. Other than a few fake people, a couple fake wagons and a light post, this is in Chicago. And we all know that Shalaga is not abandoned. There are literally no people in this photo. My point is that if this is true, that these are Photoshop people in wagons, which is looking more and more clear that this is the case, then was this the very first picture of this building for our current civilization to see? It's strange, especially when we hear the story about the building.
So I don't know if I agree with him about the Photoshop people, because long exposure film from that time that would have maybe shown two people and glitched out people. There's an explanation for that. Maybe they were at it. I don't know. But the only reason I really wanted to play that was for the Henry Cobb character that he pointed out. So I was like, I'm going to look this guy up. And there's 3 different Henry Cobbs, and they're all architects spanning all periods of time. And it's no coincidence to me that all these architects are all named Henry Cobb.
They're all named Henry Cobb. What a coincidence.
So Henry Ives Cobb was born in 1859, died in 1931. He was an architect who designed the building we just saw, and among many other buildings that look very similar, these old world buildings. Then he had a son, Henry Ives Cobb Jr., who was born in 1883 and died in 1974. And he also designed many famous, world famous buildings here in the United States anyway, and in particularly in New York. And then we have Henry Cobb, born in 1926 and died in 2020, who's not related to the other Henry Cobbs who are also architects. But this new Henry Cobb guy is responsible for a lot of the famous buildings that we recognize today in Boston and New York area. And I just don't think it's a coincidence. So what is it with this name, Henry Cobb? So if you look up the name Cobb, Cobb can also be a verb meaning to mend or patch something, especially with cob, a type of natural building material made from clay, sand, and straw. So they're telling you cob is a building material, and cob are plural cobs, a sea cob or gall, a pier made from cobblestones, a hand basket, especially made from wicker. Either way, we're looking at a building material, cob. And then if you look up Henry, Henry just simply means ruler, like the ruler, an elite ruler or something. Very interesting. And this is an image. This is Henry Ives Cobb on the top left, his son on the right, and then the modern day Henry Nichols Cobb at the bottom. I don't know. I just find it a strange coincidence that all these architects that designed some of our most famous buildings have the same exact name. Any thoughts on that, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's something there for sure. I don't think that's a coincidence. I'm
Right.
not
I mean,
exactly sure why it's
right.
that specific name.
Yeah,
But
I
there's
don't know
something
why
there.
either. Yeah. Okay, now the mud flood portion of this, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on the mud flood, but it's very apparent that all over the world there's evidence of a mud flood, and a lot of the structures were partially buried in mud, and they just decide to build on top of them. And this is part of the Great Reset. What happened? What was this catastrophe? How did this happen? Did they do it to themselves? Sherry Divband has some very interesting information about the mud flood at the end of this video. So stick around for that. But we have to look at all these examples and just show or ask ourselves what actually happened. Buildings hundreds of years old, located all over the world, are known to be encased in mud up to several stories high, and in some cases even completely engulfing buildings in nothing but mud. This is Meteki Castle, Tbilisi, circa 1930. But if you look at the streets here, you can clearly see below the street level, there's like a tunnel network that had been filled in. Now, if you guys watched our Hollow Earth webinar, I won't spend much time on these slides, but here's a closer look at it. This is completely covered up and built on top of, obviously.
Right. In the Hollow Earth webinar, we talk about how they said they filled in the tunnel network to seal it off.
Precisely. That's where I was going with
So
this. So,
that picture, that's what that looks like to me.
right.
Right there.
So we have another document. So this is from this book we talked about in our last webinar. And we have another document that literally says between 1550 and 1590, the Catholic Church ordered all entrances to caves and tunnels sealed and forbid dealings with the underground people. They were closed by official decree. Now, if you want to know more about this, you can go watch the previous webinar where we cover this a little more in depth. But regardless, this is one of the official documents dated to 1592 from the Australian Royal Family Archives that talks about the document from the year 1580 shows that the church ordered the filling of holes, caves, and tunnels below the town of Klosterneuburg, Austria. According to the author, these had been built thousands of years ago. The church ordered the ceilings to be double cemented and flooded just to make sure nobody ever crept up from below again. These works were to be overseen by guards and civilians to be kept far away. So going back to these pictures now, that's kind of looks like the evidence of exactly that, in my opinion.
It
So
definitely does.
maybe not all this was from the mud flood. Maybe some of this was intentionally filled in by the Catholic Church and who knows who else. This is a quick video of kind of what we're starting to see all over the world.
You can really find the evidence everywhere. This was uncovered recently in Iraq, where a sinkhole revealed more of our buried and lost history. So much of our true history is right beneath the surface.
I mean, look at that.
I'm filled with optimism the more and more I see clips like this, because years ago, these things were quickly swept under the rug. Very few people would even be aware of them. But now that people are waking up and starting to question everything, the cameras are starting to come out more and more. Just like these last two little clips. A completely forgotten about tunnel system in the hillsides of Turkey. Raw footage like this is becoming available more and more daily. It is truly a fantastic time to be alive and to be awake. We get the opportunity to see glimpses of this beautiful realm for what it truly was. Something our fathers, our grandfathers, and great-grandfathers would never even have dreamed of. Because the only source of information and knowledge was those government-funded education centers, same ones we all had. But now we have different sources of information coming from all over this world, disproving many of those theories taught to us as fact, with no other truths out there that are not the state-approved truth. And one last glimpse at more being revealed, this time in Moscow. Question everything, friends. Until next time.
And it just makes you wonder if what was a natural mud flood and what was actually sealed intentionally. Paris, 1973.
This is interesting. Buried Paris. This is a photograph from 1973 during the construction of Les Halles in Paris. The structure wrapped above the metal scaffolding on the right is the Fountain of the Innocents. The photograph shows underground buildings going down about 5 floors. Historians are talking about their own things again and call this a cultural layer. More and more facts about buried buildings and cities are accumulating every day. It's no longer funny for historians, and in the age of the internet, it's no longer possible to hide the truth. By the way, it's the same story with St. Petersburg in Russia.
Just another example of clearly a massive part of that building underground, encased in mud.
Right, and they just slap on the label, it's a cultural layer, and then nothing to see here, move along.
But you see the road up here. You can see these cars and
right. It's like, no, something happened there. They buried all that.
And then this is Kansas City in the 1860s. A quick video about Kansas City. It's great evidence of a mud flood here in Kansas City.
These are scenes from Kansas City, Missouri in the late 1800s. And what you will see here in many of these photos, these massive muddy streets with piles of displaced mud and clear signs of massive excavation work still ongoing. The older photos of Kansas City is rich with evidence of the mud flood. But this same scene can be found all over. The scenes of grand, much older looking architecture amongst people digging out streets for a city that was only founded in 1850, and around this time a population of around 55,000. To me it seems like one big dig site, like the unburying of old ruins. I mean, just look at some of these pictures. You can see these impossible stoneworks. People posing in front of these massive blocks, looking almost deformed bricks on incredibly overgrown forest right above it. Does this look at all new to you? This looks like the unburying of an entire castle. Just imagine all of this massive excavation work being done across the city with a population, they say, under 100,000. It certainly looks like a city in ruins, a city impossibly older than they tell us. History is nothing more than a set of lies agreed upon. Question everything, friends. Until next time.
Right. For a city that was supposed to be just being built and newly founded, it sure looks pretty ancient.
Right.
And here's more evidence in Seattle of a road right on top of a building. And U.S. Capitol renovation shows that it goes much further underground. Now it can be arguably the basement, but being in construction, some of this architecture, it would never be done on the foundation of a building if it was meant to be buried. So
Right.
at one point this was exposed and then added onto, or whatever the case was, and you can clearly see what looked like entrances to tunnels as well in some of these photos, and just a massive underground network. You know, we can speculate, but it's just another example. And here's another example, one last example, location unknown. But I mean, this literally looks like
Yeah, that one.
the top of the window. If you look at the window above, if you compare it to the window above, you can see what it's supposed to look like. So that means that much of it at least is buried. And that's the mud flood. There's also mud fossils. I'm not going to get into that one slide because this is, again, a rabbit hole in itself. Not only were the buildings buried in mud, but there is global evidence of mud fossils. Humans, giants, animals, dragons, and even organs were fossilized through a process of being rapidly encased in mud. And it's just one of those things where we have to look at every structure, every natural formation, and start questioning whether it's even natural or not, and what actually happened and what our true history was. Okay, the orphan trains.
And this is a whole rabbit hole in and of itself.
Right, but this orphan train rabbit hole explains how they might have actually gotten away with this reset without anyone remembering. And this is kind of fucked up. Like, if this is true and this is actually what happened, then, you know, we really do have to rethink everything. So where did all these kids come from? So we had over 1,600 orphan asylums or institutions in the United States, all under religious order. 1,600 orphan asylums for hundreds of thousands of kids without parents, without homes. But where did these kids come from? So here's the mainstream Wikipedia explanation. The orphan train movement was a supervised welfare program that transported children from crowded eastern cities of the United States to foster homes located largely in rural areas of the Midwest. The orphan trains operated between 1854 and 1929, relocating from about 200,000 children. The co-founders of the orphan train movement claimed that these children were orphaned, abandoned, abused, or homeless, but this was not always true. They were mostly the children of new immigrants and the children of the poor and destitute families living in these cities. Criticisms of the program include ineffective screening of caretakers, insufficient follow-ups on placements, and that many children were used as strictly slave farm labor. Let's read that last sentence again. There was ineffective screening of the caretakers, insufficient follow-ups on placements, and that many of the children were used strictly as slave farm labor. This kind of is like kicking off human trafficking. If they didn't know where these children were going, they weren't followed up. They were just kind of being tossed around like products, which is actually what was happening. And Here's just some examples of old newspaper articles: homeless orphan children, homes for children wanted, just everywhere. They couldn't get rid of these kids. There were so many kids. Where did these kids come from? I know I keep saying that, but let's answer these questions. The largest orphanage in the world, more than 25,000 orphan American children were under Dr. Elliott's care in 3 posts at Alexandropol. I'm not sure where that's at, but look at all those children. And on the right here is an orphan asylum. But I started looking at these orphan asylums. I'm like, man, they look exactly like our schools, like the original school buildings. And I think that a lot of the orphan asylums turned into school buildings. And this is from an old postcard from 1901.
From the orphanage of 25,000 strong that rivals a small army, to the many orphan asylums, to the baby incubators at the World's Fairs and other means. There was certainly a rush to repopulate this realm after the reset. The foundlings from the orphan trains and these orphan asylums, moving into the newly founded Freemasonry in these founded cities. And what did they do with these foundlings they took away from their mothers for what they tell us is a better life? They stuck them in the most dangerous and unsupervised factories around. It wasn't that child labor was supplementing the adult workforce. It was the workforce. Just look at all these scenes from mines and textile mills and anywhere else. You would be hard-pressed to find an adult in any of these scenes. Not even an adult supervisor. Well, I guess all the adults were running around building these world fairs every year. So I guess you could explain that. Or perhaps you see here, with a decimated adult population, the young were forced to grow up quickly after the reset. Question everything, friends. Until next time.
What happened to their parents? One explanation for the missing parents was that they were all in the insane asylums to keep them quiet because they held knowledge of this advanced civilization and our true past. And there was just as many insane asylums at that time also. And we all know that people who were speaking the truth would be thrown in insane asylums. The book, The Smoky God, when he came back and told about his discovery of Hollow Earth, he was thrown in an insane asylum for most of his life because obviously we know why. So maybe all these people that had information and that had knowledge of this technology, of Tartaria and of the advanced civilization were in the insane asylums. Also, maybe these kids were being grown. And that's what we're going to get into: the pod people and the Cabbage Patch Kids and the incubators. So this is a showcase of incubators. Took place at the 1896 World Exposition in Berlin. And after that, incubators became a popular attraction at other World's Fairs, according to the History Museum. The incubators at the 1904 World's Fairs were boxes made of metal and glass, allowing visitors to see babies. If they were healthy enough, babies will be removed from the incubators for public feedings, like they're pets in a zoo. And here we're going to get into the Cabbage Patch story a little bit. Did you want to add anything to this, Aaron?
I mean, so this Cabbage Patch thing is basically cloning, essentially, right?
Right.
It's growing humans,
right? And
like cloning. So as we know, almost everything that is a hidden truth has actually been around for seemingly longer than most people even realize, including cloning. And actually, there's a lot of insiders that talk about that. And that cloning's been going on for way longer than just the last few decades or even 50 years. So that would actually explain this, because if they could clone way back then, of course they could just clone a whole bunch of people, and then if they wanted to do a reset, we can just clone a bunch of babies that grow up into people and then repopulate, teach them what we want them to know, get rid of their parents, throw them in the insane asylums.
Yeah.
It could be done pretty easily. Like it's especially in an age where there's no internet, there's no even TV, or like the communication is not like it is today or even 50 years ago. It's like they could easily do this whole reset and have everyone believe what they want everyone to believe, and then boom, you just rewrite history, get rid of the stuff you don't want like the free
Right.
energy stuff. Boom, done.
And the kids won't have memory. These pod people, these grown children, they won't have memory of any of this, of
Right.
any of the past. So their only access to information is the schooling system and the
Right.
Rockefeller system, which was introduced all at the same time. So
Exactly.
that's why nobody remembered it. That's why nobody knew about this stuff until now. We have the age of the internet, right? And we can start learning about this. But let's play this little video.
Patch story, if you look into Minds Unveiled, they have a great YouTube page. They'll show about how the Cabbage Patch story and the storks, you know, how babies came in and all of the story we've been told. Well, a lot of babies and all of these little children were grown in what they believe were baby incubators and then sold to families. So the stork would come, but in reality they were growing babies and then having these little incubators, and that's the whole Cabbage Patch. And they have all these weird postcards where kids are sitting in these cabbage patches and they're showing all these children in which people are purchasing. Almost like it's a store and you would go in and pick what child you would want. If you could potentially grow babies in, let's say, the 1900s, then that really changes the whole narrative of where people came from. 1900s, where this lady's going around and she's holding babies and she's putting them in cabbage patches and all this other stuff. You sit there and go, you know, this is kind of strange, because then, okay, let's say we all have family lineage from the 1900s who came here from whatever country it may be. Maybe they didn't come here from that country. That kind of changes the whole history tree or the family lineage. You know, you go through that little family tree and you're like, oh, my father came from this and my grandma came from this. That kind of really changes everything. Because now all of a sudden you're starting to go, wait a minute, my grandpa came from an incubator? Or my uncle or aunt came from an incubator? That's why we have to ask questions about everything and all the things that we're told that are repeated and ingrained into our mind.
Precisely. And just some more images of incubators. Not hard to find information about this at all, by the way. This was the baby incubator building on the Pike at the 1904 World's Fair here in St. Louis. What happened to that building? I've never seen that magnificent structure.
Right. Me neither. I grew up in St. Louis, never once seen that. It's not there anymore. Why would they destroy that? That's amazing.
Right.
Makes no sense.
So this is a Chicago's World Fair. So I don't know if this is 1893 or 1933 World Fair. There was two of them. But this is the infant incubator building, because here's another photo of this World's Fair, but the buildings look different. Like the signs look different. So I don't know what's going on here. If they had the same exhibit at both World's Fairs, or if they changed the signs halfway through the fair, whatever. But here's more evidence of these incubator buildings. And then this is, I believe this is actually a little bit of a longer video. It kind of explains a little bit more of all of this and the Cabbage Patch children. So just sit back and enjoy this one. I think it's maybe 4 minutes long.
We've also got kids in Cabbage Patches. Does this have anything to do with the Cabbage Patch Kids? So where do babies come from? In the early 1900s, the most common answer given to children would simply be that the stork would bring the babies, or that they were found in a cabbage patch. But why would babies be found in cabbage patches? The legend of the Cabbage Patch Kids involves a young boy named Xavier who meets a mystical fairy bunny bee creature, so a hybrid or chimera, and he follows this bunny bee through a secret tunnel behind a waterfall. On the other side of this waterfall, he finds that babies are being produced in a cabbage patch. The stork, known as Colonel Casey, would then come and pick up the babies. He even has his own uniform. So he's a worker, a soldier, as well as the Cabbage Patch Kids' official historian that would then deliver the babies to their new homes. Not only that, but there's an evil witch named Lavender McDay. She and her weasel and jackrabbit henchmen are literally trying to enslave the Cabbage Patch Kids to be miners to dig for gold in the valley. You can get all the exposition for the lore in the story through their 10-song album. It goes over how they were created, to the witch, to even a lament about their enslavement. It's pretty dark. The original concept for the cloth dolls was created by Martha Nelson Thomas, and she called them doll babies. And the story really had nothing to do with cabbages or chimeras or witches. It wasn't until Xavier Roberts, or Xavier, like the little boy in the story, hijacked her design that it became what it is today. So I can't help but wonder if Xavier Roberts just came up with the story all on his own. Like, did it come to him from the collective consciousness? Or does he just have a soft spot for child labor? There's actually a place you can go in White County, Georgia, where they do live births, and you can look it up on YouTube to see what I'm talking about. The bunny bee character also is a hybrid creature of two animals that both symbolize rebirth and resurrection on a mass scale. As we know, rabbits reproduce in droves, and the bee symbolism makes me think of a hive, or a queen or source where all the offsprings originate from. It would seem that this is some sort of reference to babies being created in a lab on a mass scale. Why were there so many orphans? Most common answer will be, the baby boom. But this didn't happen until 1946 to 1964. These postcards are from 1890 to 1910. And there's really no explanation for the burst of orphans that we see being brought into the United States, or the amount of orphanages and asylums that exist that no longer seem to be necessary. Could the baby boom narrative be a way to sweep this part of history under the rug? The orphanages were all shut down, and after the 60s, people just stopped having babies and getting married after World War II, according to the narrative. Then there were the incubators of the 1900s. It's difficult to keep premature babies alive with modern technology, yet they were doing this back in 1835 in Europe. They turned this into a sideshow, where at the world fairs they would show off these child hatcheries, these incubators of live children, and for some reason the royals would come and witness these events. So there's this genetic manipulation cloning idea in which these babies are actually being grown in some sort of pods. Perhaps the symbolism of the Cabbage Patch mirrors that process. Humans do resemble plants in the way that we're connected to a stem in our fetal state, and our whole lives are spent ripening. In the fetal abduction theory, we typically see a nurse-looking woman with either a fishing hook or a fishing net pulling a child out of the water. Perhaps the hook and net represent medical tools and the water amniotic fluid. In either scenario,
it keeps going, but I mean, man, if any of that's true, like it makes sense. You kind of summarized it before I played that, Aaron. Like they could have easily done this. And here's a video of these Cabbage Patch kids being born in the store, which I just think is disturbing and very interesting. So I'm going to play it.
Okay, let's see what's inside here. Oh, here he comes. It's a little boy. Give him a smack on the bottom. Get him to cry. Oh, look, he's very sweet. Get his nappy on. Bit of powder, make him smell beautiful. There we go. This on your baby. His name's Jack. There you are. Give him a big cuddle and a big kiss. Isn't he beautiful? And there his papers. Look here, look Louisa. Look, there's his papers. It's his name. Jack Buck. They're like little people. It's not as if you're just going into a shop and buying a doll and walking out. It's nice to go through the whole thing of seeing them born. You can see how they're being changed, and they get fed and they get loved. You sign adoption papers, you say an oath. And it's just a nice sense of belonging for the owners of the new owners of their babies.
You sign adoption papers and you say an oath.
For a doll baby.
So that brings us to this movie from the Mind Unveiled YouTube channel. Brought this movie to our attention. It's called Patch Town, and I watched it, and it literally is about them cloning people in a factory, and these babies are, this is a scene from the movie, babies are being born out of the cabbages, and when they put the baby into a cryogenic state, they freeze it, and it looks like a doll. Once they freeze the baby, it actually looks like a doll. And in the movie, that's where the name the Cabbage Patch Doll came from. But it's such a crazy movie because all the workers were actually grown children as well. So all the employees were born there, and they're all been mind controlled, and they show them all being mind controlled with MK Ultra headsets, and then their memory wiped. It's a crazy movie, and
It's
I
a
recommend it. It's very weird,
really weird, creepy, crazy movie.
but I watched all of it, and there's a lot of disclosure in it. So,
There is a lot of disclosure in it, though.
and then there were so many homeless orphans in the 1800s that they were auctioned off to the highest bidder, almost as if they were products. And I came across this video here of this woman feeding children, throwing coins and grains to the children, almost as if she just bought them in an auction.
And how dehumanizing and degrading is this as well?
Right. It's enough of that.
Right.
But yeah, this is a reality that we can't ignore. We have to start going back and asking these questions. And then we're going to get into the World's Fairs, and then this will wrap it up. And the reason I know we covered a lot of the World's Fair stuff, but this is very interesting. This is where we get into the higher dimensions. This is just really quick footage. So there's actually footage, like actual footage from these World Fairs, not just photos, which I think is fascinating.
This is a panorama of the 1901 World's Fair in Buffalo, New York. And as the narrative goes, everything you see here was temporary. Built in less than 2 years, torn down after only 6 months. In that 6-month time, this fair had 8 million visitors in the 350 acres that it sat on. Today, the fairgrounds of Buffalo look unrecognizable. Only a few temporary buildings remain out of the hundreds built for this fair. And as beautiful as it looks in the daytime, it looked even more beautiful at night. Over 250,000 light bulbs were used for this rainbow city, with the 410-foot electric tower being the center point. Just imagine this massive scale, all built with horse and buggy. Does the narrative add up to you? Question everything, friends. Until next time.
So you can't have a World's Fair without a fire. The city of Chicago, as it was before the fire, Chicago had a fire in 1871. The Great Chicago Fire was a conflagration that burned in the America city of Chicago during October 8th through 10th, 1871. The fire killed approximately 300 people, destroyed roughly 3.3 square miles of the city, including over 17,000 structures, and left more than 100,000 residents without their homes. But what's interesting is on the left is the dark area is the area affected by the fire. On the right is where the World's Fair was built. And I highlighted it on the left over here, the same area. So the exact footprint of the fire is where the World's Fair was built, almost like they cleared it out intentionally. Very interesting. And then these are some photos from the Chicago's World Fair, which looks like ancient Greece and nothing like Chicago. I mean, it's hilarious, actually. It's so amazing.
Right.
And just for it to not be there anymore or just be destroyed. And then, so St. Louis had a fire in 1849. A hard wind blew from the northeast across the Mississippi River. It would serve as a bellows for the long, destructive night of May 17th and 18th, 1849, the St. Louis Great Fire. The firestorm added to the city's worst single disaster, a cholera epidemic that would kill at least 4,317 people. The May 17th newspapers were filled with news of death. So on top of a fire, they had a pandemic, an epidemic that killed over 4,000 people.
What a coincidence.
Right. The Great Fire destroyed 418 buildings on 15 blocks. 3 people were confirmed dead. I would imagine there's more than that, but more probably perished on the steamboats. At least one burning boat blew up. St. Louis rebounded from the fire and rebuilt, blah, blah, blah. But it's just more evidence of them killing people off and destroying the old world. This is supposed to be post-fire,
Right.
but the
And-
one...
Oh, real quick, in my opinion, basically an entire city doesn't just burn randomly. Like, that's caused by someone.
Well, the theme
That's
is I'm only covering St. Louis and Chicago, but if you start looking around at all these world fairs, there's almost always a fire first. There was one in San
right.
Diego.
Hmm.
It just, I mean, it was a false
Like
flag.
when, right, and like when Rome burnt by
Right,
Nero back in the day, like
right.
he did it. It was caused. It wasn't just random. Like same thing with all these fires. They were caused
Or
on purpose.
like Maui, right?
Or
Um,
Maui, right? That's a
but
very good.
look at the building that survived, the cathedral. They didn't burn that.
Right. Oh wow, interesting.
And then so this is the construction before the fire. That's also before the fire. And then after the fire, boom.
Right.
We just magically turned
Magically,
into the
it
master
turns into this.
masons. Yeah. Um, yeah, before the fire, everything burns down, and then oh look,
A completely different
right.
civilization. It looks like
It is
'cause
a
it
completely
is.
different civilization. This I card or whatever it is from the World's Fair, it just whatever devices is depicting on here, it looks like a technology. I don't know what that is, but I find it curious. I just can't believe that this was in St. Louis. I just can't fathom
Right.
it. You know what I'm saying? It just looks like it's another country, right?
It
Just
doesn't. Right. It doesn't even look like the U.S. Like it
right.
looks like.
Just more examples of it. So then, but what's interesting about the fire in St. Louis, it didn't actually burn the footprint for the World's Fair, but it did burn exactly where the arch was built, would eventually be built, which is also built by the Freemasons. And this Capitol building, this old courthouse building, has a very strange history as well. And in 1896, also before the World's Fair, there was a tornado, a devastating tornado, the worst one in history up to date, that destroyed 12,000 buildings and killed who knows how many people in St. Louis. I mean, massive destruction.
Right. Katie Rain says Seattle was a big fire and then floods. So
Yep.
Seattle as well, same thing.
Yeah. This is a really quick video, just of some more footage. All right, so this is information from the books that I was gifted about the World's Fair, and it's very interesting how they refer to the World's Fair as a universal exposition. Most American of American communities, a people drawn from all parts of the world, St. Louis is still making history. The first decade of the new century has added 30% to the population. With that period, St. Louisans created and conducted the greatest of world's fairs, a universal exposition in a comprehensive meaning of the words. Metropolitan progress has been more rapid and more important for the city in the past 10 years than in thrice that time preceding. Advancement along educational, architectural, artistic lines has been notable. New forces for higher civilization have become powerful. The time is fitting to look backward. New forces for higher civilization have become powerful. What does that mean? So we have to read between the lines here with some of this information in this book.
St. Louis is the natural center of the vast fertile territory of the Southwest, and with her natural advantages, must inevitably become the most important metropolis of this country. From the address of Honorable James Bryce, British Ambassador before the Commercial Club of St. Louis, June 19th, 1907.
The most important metropolis of this country. Interesting.
Open ye gates, swing wide ye portals, enter herein, ye sons of men, and behold the achievements of your race. Learn the lesson here taught and gather from it inspiration for still greater accomplishments. David R. Francis, opening day, April 30th, 1904.
So swing wide ye portals. Like just
Portals.
the concept of a universal exposition, portals, gates. They're talking about higher civilization becoming more powerful. It's just interesting when you read between the lines and the terminology they use to describe these world fairs. This also shows the significance of Chinese involvement. So, China was the very first country involved in the St. Louis World Fair. They were one of the first groups over here that decided to come and help. Not only did they accept, but the government proceeded with an impressive measure of vigor in this new enterprise. The flag of the Yellow Dragon was raised quickly on the World's Fairgrounds, which also that flag is representative of the Tartarian flag, in my opinion. A prince of the imperial blood was the head of the Chinese commission. Interesting. So we have evidence here of the Chinese involvement in the World's Fairs, which Tartarian connection right there.
Yep.
And they specifically talk about that flag. And then here's some photographs of their pavilion, the Chinese pavilion at the World's Fair, and some of their other buildings. Pretty amazing. Let's get into the advanced technology of the World's Fair. So this is really interesting. And this is also from the same book. Processes rather than products, which it was proclaimed should distinguish the plan and scope of this universal exposition, were conspicuous in every department. Wireless telegraphy was illustrated by daily operation of the mechanism in the Department of Electricity. So we have wireless technology already. Under the observation of judges, officially appointed messages were transmitted 300 miles. The successful sending of aerograms short distances from 1 to 10 miles was demonstrated in numerous instances. Transmission of sound without wire was shown to be possible. Rays of light for medical purposes were produced in several forms. So we have wireless technology, rays of light used for medical purposes. We're talking about stuff that we see in Star Trek, right? Like it was already around in the early 1900s.
Tesla tech.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what it was. Yeah. So what happened to it? This is the next question.
Right.
Why do we not have it anymore?
All right. So this is a book I found randomly at a flea market or something. I was at my nephew's soccer game and there was this church that was selling all this stuff. And they had a World's Fair book. And the lady said that her grandfather actually took the pictures in this book. Like it was her grandfather was a photographer, and I got it for like 50 cents or something insane like that. But what's interesting about this, so you want to talk about advanced technology. Again, 40 years later, the power of science enters the still mass of dead metal, and a tiny ray from the star Arcturus causes a new city of wonder to flame with a medley of light and color, revealing ultra-modern windowless buildings of daring design. What does that mean? A tiny ray from the star Arcturus causes a new city of wonder to flame. And we'll get into that in the next slide. But on the right here is the Rockefeller Chapel at the Chicago World's Fair, which contained 70 bells. So the Rockefeller Chapel had 70 bells in it, which I find very interesting. They knew something.
Right. What did they know about the bells?
Here it is. This is what we're going to talk about with this ray of light. A century of progress is a procession of surprises. It was constructed on ground pumped from the bottom of Lake Michigan. Its lighting system was put in operation by a ray of light from the star Arcturus. After a 40-year journey over 225 million miles, it had loudspeakers throughout the grounds, baby incubators, a place to check children, a theater with a revolving stage, windowless buildings, and so on without end. So think about that. They were able to harness light from the star Arcturus at the exact time that it reached our planet from 225 million miles away to turn the power on at the World's Fair. Like, what does that even mean? Like,
and we're running off gas, coal, and oil still for our yeah. Something's not adding up here.
It literally is amazing to me, actually, to think that they were even thinking that direction back then. And that they had the wherewithal to understand that they could even power a city or turn on the lights from starlight. If you knew how to harness the beam of light, the ray of light coming from the star, you could use it to power the city. It's just amazing to me.
Some knowledge is being hidden.
And then they had a midget village which I find interesting. But what's interesting, if you look at this picture, if you can see they have there's some normal size humans, and then you can look around and you see a few midgets over there to the left. But if you look on each side of that doorway, there's giants. There's two giants there, and it even says them. In contrast to these midgets are the tall Oriental-looking guards at each side of the entrance. So, or tall Oriental-looking guards. So we have possibly Tartarians, who are these Oriental guards that are almost twice the size of the rest of the people at the World's Fair.
Uh, the great burden of responsibility was carried by the city and citizens of St. Louis, but the Universal Exposition of 1904 in its entirety, physical and spiritual, was due to the combined genius and experience of the whole world. From the day the Commission of Architects convened in St. Louis, summoned by wire to view the grounds and to outline the main picture, it was more than the St. Louis World's Fair. As details of architecture and landscape were added to the original scheme, the construction and embellishment became more and more the work and the glory of cities, states, and nations until the exposition grew into its just designation of universal.
I just think it's interesting that they decide to use the term universal and talking about it being physical and spiritual.
Yeah. It's like they're telling you something here.
Right. And then the uplifting of humanity. So, when the plan and scope of this exposition was laid before one of the crowned heads of Europe, he listened without much comment until was reached the proposal to bring together in a universal congress of arts and science the wise men of all the world. Thereupon the emperor gave more than his assent to participation, his hearty approval. The new thing of this exposition was the harmonizing, the unification of all knowledge to the uplifting of humanity, to the betterment of mankind. That was the great lesson attempted. That was to be the distinguishing note of progress in the universal exposition. Time can only demonstrate the fulfillment of the high purpose. So they were talking about the harmonizing and unification of all knowledge and the uplifting of humanity. So I almost wonder if this was an attempt to maybe not, like, so the reset happened after the World's Fairs. So I wonder if this was an attempt to tell the world exactly, like, show the world what we were capable of, but
unify the world and share this advanced technology with the whole world. That's what it sounds like to me.
I feel like it was an attempt, but I feel like it was either infiltrated or those plans were foiled, or this was how it was sold to all the other countries.
Or that was the lie that was sold.
That's how it was sold to them.
Right.
An exposition upon higher planes, a condition which materially encouraged and promoted universal, there's that word again, universal participation by nations and their colonies, as well as by the states of this union, was the high and distinctive character of the plan and scope of this exposition. Foreign commissioners returning to their homes from their first visits to St. Louis and from their first acquaintance with the advanced policies of this exposition, almost without exception, increased their space applications. State commissioners, after visiting St. Louis and conferring with the World's Fair management, carried back the wondrous story until the whole world knew that this was to be an exposition upon higher planes with loftier ideals than any preceding World's Fair. An exposition upon higher planes. I just think it's very interesting, all the terminology they use to describe this. It's like they're telling you without telling you.
They're telling you higher plane, it's higher dimension. They're telling you, right. They're telling you in a way that, most people aren't going to get, but they're telling you.
Right. And this book is from 1909. This is what I'm reading this from. So I have a friend, Jordan Dreste. We interviewed him on the podcast, and he has a friend who won't talk out of fear of ridicule, but she has amazing information. And he was just telling me in conversation one day that, yeah, my friend so-and-so said that she thinks the World's Fair's buildings weren't destroyed, but we shifted dimensions. And some of them stayed here, but some of them weren't actually destroyed. Now, some of them were because we have the evidence that they were, but it just like triggered that thought, that idea. I'm like, that's very interesting. It was actually the first time I had heard of that concept. So that makes you wonder, like maybe something like that did happen. Maybe we shifted into a lower frequency and some of those buildings just aren't visible to us anymore. Kind of like the fringe thing in the alternative reality with the Zeppelin.
Right.
And then we have this case. Well, I'll play this video really quick.
This man claimed to be from a country that doesn't exist, and some people say his story could be proof of a parallel universe. In July of 1954, a businessman entered a Tokyo airport and was asked for his passport, which he then handed over. His passport said he was from a country named Torad, and it looked 100% legit and even had stamps from other countries. But the country of Torad doesn't exist. Trying to understand the situation, the customs officers brought out a map and had him point to where the country of Torad was, and he pointed right here. He pointed to the country we know of as Andorra, and this perplexed the man, and he said the map was wrong. And what's even crazier is that the man said he had flown from Torad to Tokyo many times in the past. Since security couldn't verify where this man was from, they detained him and put him in a hotel and put guards at the door. The guards never left the door, but the next morning the mysterious man, along with his belongings and passport, had disappeared.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a few different accounts like this where people have claimed to come from another dimension. So, I mean, we can't rule this out. You know what I mean? It sounds wild, but and there's also this coin. You can read this, Aaron.
Yeah, I found this. So in 2018, a man named Diego Aviles discovered a mysterious coin with the year 2039 imprinted on it. The coin features Nazi symbolism as well as the words Nueva Alemania, which translates to New Germany. Some say it's a hoax, while others claim it's proof of a parallel universe. So obviously this could be a hoax. This could be photoshopped, blah, blah, blah. Of course, that's a possibility. You could have someone analyze the photo to make sure it wasn't Photoshop, but it could still be a hoax. But who would hoax? What's the purpose? And also, I mean, if this is from a parallel reality, it's also from the future in a parallel reality, which is also interesting.
Right.
2039, it's almost like if you've seen the show The Man in the High Castle, which supposedly shows a parallel reality, the one where Nazi Germany on the surface level won World War II and how things would play out after that. To me, that this looks like it would be from that timeline, that parallel reality, that parallel timeline.
Right. And actually, I just thought of something too. I forgot to add the slide of going back to the pod people and the Cabbage Patch Kids. So there's another video where this guy explains that the pod people, the people that were born from the pods, are the modern day NPCs. Like the ones they were basically the ones who they're able to program. And so that the lineage, the people that came from the pods, they had that same lineage and that bloodline. For some reason, they were able to program that bloodline, and
that would explain a lot. Actually,
yeah.
that actually makes a lot of sense.
I can't believe I forgot to put that video. It just dawned on me. So maybe the pod people are the NPCs, the Cabbage Patch Kids are all the modern day NPCs, or at least that lineage.
Right? Who knows? Anything's possible.
Because he explained it like they had programmable. Basically, they were mind controlled, but they had programmable DNA or I don't know. Who knows?
Right.
So who's seen the movie Tomorrow World or Tomorrowland? I'm sorry. It's about the 1964 World's Fair, a fair that took place in the Flushing Meadows of Long Island, New York from 1964 to 1965. And Plus Ultra, a secret society, secretly operated the Hall of Invention Pavilion at that time, as they usually did during the World's Fairs back then. In the movie, Frank explains that Gustav Eiffel, Jules Verne, Nikola Tesla, and Thomas Edison co-founded Plus Ultra, a secret society of futurists creating Tomorrowland in another dimension, free to make scientific breakthroughs without obstruction.
I mean, this sounds like pure disclosure to me. I mean, Tesla right there. What we've been talking about this whole time. Free energy Tesla technology.
Right. But what's interesting though is so the whole movie is surrounded by the World's Fair. And within the World's Fair, there's an exhibit that was created by the secret society that where you literally can access another dimension where they were free to make scientific breakthroughs. It was basically another dimension just outside of our reality where they were building out this advanced civilization. And
Right.
in the movie, spoiler alert, this token that you see here with the T on it is actually your invite into that city, which is interesting that they use a T, Tartaria, you know, Tomorrowland. But we have basically what we have is a World Fair connection to another dimension. And it's extremely fascinating to me.
Right. And in the movie, they show them flashing into that like higher dimension or that other dimension. And then everything's super futuristic and Fury energy, everything's super amazing.
Right.
Um, it's like to me, they're telling you, they're like, hey, this exists and you can, there's people going there and it's all
Yeah.
hidden from us.
Yeah, exactly. It's just interesting. It's a movie that literally kind of discloses exactly what we were speculating about the World's Fairs and Tartaria being built in another dimension. In this in this movie, it
Mhm.
literally discloses an advanced civilization being built in another dimension. And just a side note, this is the jump room within It's a Small World ride in the movie. He goes into this jump room and it takes him to the other dimension, which I find it interesting. If you look, it says the special. At first glance, I see SSP. And then this scene shows like SSP right there. So it's almost to me like I see it as disclosure. Like this is a jump room that he's walking into right now. Once he goes into this room, it's a portal to the other dimension, and they have SSP right there in your face. So it kind of it makes you wonder if like everything that occurs in the SSP is in another dimension as well, which a lot of whistleblowers have speculated anyway. But I just found it interesting that they put that in there.
Right. Oh, and about the T, Jock Doubleday just said Tomorrowland, Tesla, capital T. So it's also Tesla.
Yeah.
So Tomorrowland, Tesla, Tartaria, T, is in all
Right.
those.
Yeah, they're telling you without telling you.
Right.
I
They're
mean,
telling you.
you have to watch the movie, and also the movie depicts a tower that can communicate between the dimensions. And Andrew Bashago talks about a tower in Colorado Springs that can actually our government has access to that can communicate to other dimensions, and that's how he found his way back home whenever he showed up in the wrong timeline. So there's a lot of disclosure there. And then this is an article, the American Enterprise Institute. Where is our Tomorrowland? The Plus Ultra Secret Society was formed at the World's Fair in 1889. Eiffel met Jules Verne and Thomas Edison at his tower apartment to start a secret society of optimists. Key members of Plus Ultra included Ray Bradbury, Amelia Earhart, Mark Twain, Nikola Tesla, and other key scientific figures. Walt Disney was a member of Plus Ultra. The Tomorrowland 56 expansion at Disneyland was actually about training future society members for the journey to an alternate universe that had been found or developed by Plus Ultra. The blueprints for the expansion held key technologies that enabled the journey, including supra transport. Key VIPs who were encouraged to join Plus Ultra were given a special VIP audio tour of World's Fair attractions such as Ford's Magic Skyway and It's a Small World. For those that couldn't attend the fair, a double grooved LP was given with the details. It's a Small World at the 1964 World's Fair contained a portal to Tomorrowland. So that all of that stuff doesn't show up in the movie, but that's you have to wonder like where did this plot line come from, and is all of that exactly real? And
Right.
that double grooved LP does exist that talks about all these details of this advanced civilization. It's like 14 minutes long. This is just a picture from the 1964 World's Fair from that movie, but I'm not going to play the LP because it's too long. I have it here, but this is it. You can listen to the entire thing, and I showed you this, Aaron. I sent it to you, and
Mhm.
this came out in the '60s, and it talks about all the technology that we're trying to still move into today, and they tell you about all this advanced civilization. It's pretty amazing.
Right.
I'll put the link to that in the description, and we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up now. with our message from Sherry Divband. So sit back and enjoy this information that's coming through her sessions from the children that she works with. So this is next level stuff, and we hope you enjoy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sherry Divband, and I'm going to talk to you about what I know about Tartaria today. I've had a couple of sessions in the past that Tartaria has come up maybe about 3 to 4 years ago. And at the time, I thought it was pretty cool, but I didn't do anything with the information, and I didn't have a lot of sessions after that really added to it. So it was just kind of pushed aside, and I never really thought about it again until recently, because it seems to be coming up a lot more. I had a session recently with a young woman who has a few children, and one of her children, who's now 9 years old, is from there, and it came out during the session. And I was able to get a good amount of information from her, and then recall memory from the past sessions that I had, and they were really similar. So I wanted to take a moment to share with you what I do know. So it's an ancient civilization in the idea that there's a lot of indigenous beings that collectively came together to create such an empire, such a reality. Because what makes it unique and different is that although it was in the third dimension, it actually existed in the fifth dimension that was terraformed on outer Earth. So it had a frequency embedded around it, like a grid, like its own safety grid, like its own safety net. And from what I understand, that was intentional so that they could bring together certain types of people from different backgrounds, which I'll explain more in a second, in order to. It's almost as though it was explained to me like they were trying to create the new world, the new Earth, outside of the Earth in fifth dimensional reality that eventually the third dimension would turn into. So it was almost like experiment isn't the right word, but it's something similar to that in our language. Like it was like a trial. Let's see what we can create on outer Earth in this terraformed reality that is very new Earth. Very connected to new Earth ideals. But in reality, it wasn't really new Earth ideals. It was connected to ancient civilization philosophies, pulling from Lemuria, pulling from Atlantis, pulling from other planets. And more specifically, which I did not know, is they were pulling from inner Earth beings, specifically Shambhala and other Agartha civilizations or beings, networks and pockets of beings. So this particular girl, she was a high priestess. I won't give her name for her privacy, but she was on a grand council. And what she showed me was that it had a lot of Persian, Mongolian, and Russian influence, meaning they took the backgrounds, the philosophies, and the genetics and things. So there was a mixture actually of different backgrounds, genetic and demographic backgrounds placed within this energy field that was somewhere located in Russia, kind of along the wall of China. And what it seems like they built this wall. They didn't call it the wall of China. I just assumed that's what they were talking about, that a very massive wall was built to keep themselves protected, so to keep other people out. And this wall actually also acted, so it was a physical wall that we know of as the wall of China, but it was a energetic wall. So what it would also it created this frequency grid that was connected to the wall, the physical wall, and it would create some sort of a terraform, some sort of a hidden in plain sight whole civilization that people normally would be walking through that land, and it would just look like open land, but in reality there was a whole world. And there are a lot of movies depicted like this that was brought to my attention that I hadn't seen, but it's something similar to that. And what I was told is that there are others, which I don't know a lot about, but basically there are others similar to Tartaria that are in a much smaller what's the word I'm trying to think of? They're much smaller in size that are in the United States. So these big fields of land where it seems like there's nothing and it's just farmland, there's this open land, that there are civilizations out there that we can't see that are terraformed, some of which are government owned, which is interesting that there's a very, I won't say the name, but a very specific wealthy person, one of the most wealthy people in the world that has bought up a lot of land. And there is a correlation with that. So that's a whole other conversation. But so these beings that were of Persian descent, Mongolian descent, Russian descent, and many from Agartha and Shambhala resided in this civilization. And it had a very controlled environment because it was terraformed, so they didn't experience harsh weather, thunderstorms, any of that. Everything was as it should be. It was almost like a reflection of inner earth. And this high priestess, she showed me that there was a grand council of different ages, different genders. They didn't have any money, but everyone contributed by skill, their skill set. So from the time a child was born, actually, if you take it a step back, it seems as though they had conscious pregnancies or conceptions, where they would call in souls that had a specific skill set that they needed, which sounds a lot like Lemuria, and they would come in. So when they were born, they would kind of already know what they were going to do, the skill set that they would have. So they would be kind of groomed is a horrible word for what I'm trying to say, but they would be prepared. They would be taught that they would kind of nurture that gift that they came in with. And the high priestess on these councils would ensure that they were placed in the right, put in the right places. And so everyone had their skills, everyone would contribute. They didn't call it a barter system, but it would be kind of like what we would see today. It was just known that these people were the farmers, and they would share their bounty. But then there were those that made other things that they needed, and then there would be a trade essentially. Back to the pregnancies, it was based on astrology. Many came from the Pleiades, inner Earth, Lyran civilizations, some Andromeda. The people a lot of them were fair-skinned, very tall, very large. Freckles on their faces almost, but then there were darker skin. So it seemed like there was a variation where they had this beautiful tan skin all the way to this very fair skin. They are 100% telepathic, although they could choose to speak, but they wouldn't speak in words. It would be more of tones and frequencies and sounds. They ate no meat. They would only eat vegetation, and they they ate a small fraction of what we eat now. Maybe 15% of our diet, because they would receive a lot of their nourishment from the sun. And the tree of life in Shambhala would send up, I don't know how to explain it other than the roots from the tree of life would connected to the roots in Tartaria, and they would create these streams, and it would feed these streams with almost like the essence of life. And they could drink that, and it was thicker in consistency than water. It was flavorless, it seems like, although when I tapped into it in my session, it seemed like it had a sweet taste, so I'm not really sure. And that nourished them way more than any food could. Now the animals and the people were in a very cohesive relationship. So there was no hunting, no abuse. They just they could communicate with each other, so they coexisted. Nobody owned, there were no pets, so they didn't have dogs and cats. They're just wild, free, really free, and if they could choose to interact with one another, but there was no ownership. They also willingly communicated with galactic beings. They knew that they had galactic ancestry, and there was nothing weird about it or nothing nefarious. And they would also connect to inner Earth, their counterparts and their families. They used portal systems, different transport systems. So it was very advanced, and it seemed like there was a lot. That maybe tens of thousands of people living within. There probably more. I'm not really sure. So what it seems happened, and they had very advanced architecture, where their buildings actually had in frequency codes embedded. So the frequencies embedded in the architecture and the way that they were built and the geometrical patterns and shapes, all were communication devices and helped with free energy. But it was so much more than that. I felt like I was only understanding a very small fraction of what I was being shown, the capabilities of these frequencies in the buildings. Like they out there, like I wasn't getting it. It was more. And every time I thought I got it, it was even more than that. So imagine healing abilities. They would give off frequencies that were harmonic for their bodies, similar to 432 hertz, but I don't actually think that's what it was. And it helped keep balance among the people and their bodies, their physical bodies. They respected their dead, and if somebody were to leave, it was because they wanted, so there was no disease or illness. So they would have certain people that would have ceremonies to wish the soul well on their journey back home, which they believed was either they were going back to inner earth or they were going back to another reality that was that they were connected to, but willingly. And then they would offer the bodies to the earth, to Mother Gaia, and the nourishment that it would give as the body was absorbed by the soil into the earth, and it would go into the roots, and it would go back into the tree of life. And it was this beautiful, harmonious reality that, from what I understand, was to create on a small scale where we are headed. Because I've said this a bunch of times in other sessions. I've seen terraforming taking place all over outer Earth, but in a different way than we understand it, where it will be pockets to ensure that there are protective grids around, somewhat like Tartaria, so that if other beings were to come into this reality that had a nefarious agenda, they wouldn't be able to get through, something like that. So what it sounds like, they had the same technology because they're quite advanced, where they could see, like looking glass technology, but way more advanced than that. So they could see that there were some sort of infiltration was going to occur, or something was going to happen on outer Earth that was going to cause that reality to be in a place that was not safe for them anymore. And it would place them in a vulnerable space. And they didn't want the technology to be found, because they didn't want it to get into the wrong hands, because those that were in seek of this reality, who had an idea it was there, were the ones in search of it, and they didn't want them to have the technology that would allow them to potentially use that for negative agendas, like we're seeing now in many different ways. So this is where it got interesting, because they said that this reality will come back, and in some reality in the quantum, it still exists. Like nothing ever really goes away. It's just not in the way that it was in the physicality, more, I think, energetic. But the words they used was interesting, because they said that the reality, or this empire, folded in on itself when invasions were imminent. And that was a direct quote. And I said that a couple of times to make sure I was understanding it correctly. And so we can interpret that in many different ways, but it sounds as though they knew that destruction was imminent. So they decided to create this, really, that the people were able to leave their bodies, but the flood served many purposes. One, so that the bodies would be washed away and reabsorbed into the earth, so there wouldn't be a lot of evidence, but also to kind of just the evidence of the reality at all, just so that if there was a bleed through between realities, or their terraform broke down and it would be obvious in the third dimension, then they would, a lot of the buildings and structures would be destroyed to a certain degree, for the technology not to be used, the embedded frequencies. That's why there's so much damage. But it's interesting how they said it folded in on itself when invasions were imminent. So it's like they knew something was coming. They said, okay, we've got enough data and all the things that we needed to get out of this. Let's let's fold it in on itself, and we're going to go either retreat back to Shambhala and inner earth, or we're going to retreat wherever these other beings were coming from. And it was kind of like this what we would call like a test run to see what we were going to do. So one thing that I saw, because once I connected to this girl, it was for 3 days, I was still getting more information. It was like these downloads that would come sporadically. And another thing that I saw was that a lot of the people that that exited their bodies, they were reborn into North America, here to help with the ascension, and not just North America, to pockets of the world, in order to advance civilization, so that they could utilize what they learn and the wisdom and all of that, and come back in the third dimension in order to assist in the transition to fifth, globally. So there are a lot of them in the fifth dimension. I could speculate in the third dimension, sorry, in North America, and I can speculate who I have an idea that those people could be around the world, but those are just speculations, so I'm not going to share that with you. But I think there are a lot, and I think that the reason that Tartaria is really an important topic right now, and it keeps seemingly seems to keep coming up, is because I think that if you're interested in it, likely you have a connection to it in some way. Perhaps you were there, even for a moment, even connected through other soul family members, even through connection of the quantum collective, just tapping in and knowing that it existed and being a part of it in some way. So we know, you are awakening to the relevance of it, and the knowing that there's a significance there, and we are activating this information or this wisdom within us that can be, we can create this type of reality, and this is where we're headed, and we are being guided to remember, because we are connected in some way. And I think that it's such a beautiful thing. So for those of you interested in this, and for those of you watching Tyler and Aaron's webinar, and others out there that probably exist, there's a reason for it. There's a reason you're interested. And through this session with this young woman, helped me awaken something inside of me, where I realized that I think that I have a connection there as well, which is why I was getting download after download. So there's more stuff coming through, and as it comes through, I'll share it in my next book. But for right now, I believe that was a majority of what I had to share at this time. I'm just double checking my notes. I'm sure there's more. I always forget something, but that was a majority of it. So I hope that this information was helpful for you guys. Thanks so much for listening.
The end. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sherry, for making that video for us. I saw you in the chat. We really can't thank you enough. We really appreciate it.
That was phenomenal. Thank you so much, Sherry.
And way to bring it home with like the multi-dimensional aspect of all of this. Like, of course, it wouldn't be a Journey to Truth webinar unless we went all the way with it, right?
Yeah.
There's so much Tartaria information that doesn't touch on the dimensional aspect at all. And I don't think people are even considering that yet. So I think it's a new concept, a new idea that's coming forward. A lot of this World Fair stuff potentially being built in another dimension, the Tomorrowland connection, these secret societies involved, everything that Sherry just shared with us. We really have to start stretching our imagination here and considering that all things are possible. And we really don't understand what's happening on this planet at all. We have no clue, but we're figuring it out, and we're doing it with each other. So we hope you guys enjoyed this. I know it was very long. Did you want to add anything before we wrap this up, Aaron?
Just thank you guys so much for watching. It was long, so thanks for sticking around. Thanks for your love and support. It means the world to us. We couldn't do this without you guys. So we love you so much, and thank you so much for your support.
Absolutely. Good night, everybody. We love you, and until next time, have a great evening.
Good night, guys.